Chapter 399. Go to watch net. Zhao Yuzhen didn't expect that when he called the TV station to make trouble for Li Yundong, he would become Li Yundong's enemy. This really made Zhao Yuzhen feel disgusted, as if he had swallowed a fly. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. But fortunately, Li Yundong didn't seem to find that the 7 people kneeling there before were secretly found by him. Thinking of this, Zhao Yuzhen couldn't help wiping away his cold sweat. When he saw these gangsters kneeling in front of the store early in the morning, he was so scared that he almost turned around and ran away. If it hadn't been for the large number of onlookers at that time, he would have run away. This bastard! Why does he have to make things difficult for me every time? Zhao Yuzhen gritted his teeth and thought. He didn't feel that he was the cause of all these things at all, nor did he feel guilty at all. He only felt frustrated and unwilling. But after 2 lessons, Zhao Yuzhen completely gave up the idea of finding someone to make trouble for him. He began to think about how to make some trouble for Li Yundong's opening ceremony. It would be best if he couldn't open the business. Then he would wake up laughing at night. But what Zhao Yuzhen hoped most was that he could open his store earlier than Li Yundong, so that he could see the envy and jealousy in the other party's eyes. Especially when he saw the other party's cold opening ceremony. He could laugh at this young man, who had always annoyed him. But now it seemed that his wish was slowly becoming an extravagant hope. Li Yundong and a group of beautiful women were decorating the store. This should have been a laughable thing. But Zhao Yuzhen couldn't laugh at all, because Li Yundong and his team's progress was 3 times that of these professional workers. In one day, they finished what these professionals had done in 3 days. This was simply the most incredible thing in the world. Zhao Yuzhen gritted his teeth with hatred, but there was nothing he could do in his heart. He didn't want to see the opening ceremony of the opposite store, while his store was still under construction. I'm a star entrepreneur in a city, but I can't beat a young man. Zhao Yuzhen was so angry that he walked around the store like a trapped beast in a cage. Just as he was getting angry, a woman suddenly came in. She stood at the door and asked in a deep voice, "Is Zhao Yuzhen here?" Since Zhao Yuzhen had become famous, no one had ever called him by his name. Even the mayor had to politely call him Mr. Zhao when he saw him. Suddenly, a woman called his name, and he immediately said angrily, "Who is it?" He turned his head and saw a woman with a graceful figure standing at the entrance of the shop. Not only was she beautiful, but there was also a condescending arrogance between her brows, as if she was a superior creature looking down on a lower creature. Zhao Yuzhen had seen many beautiful women, but since the first time he had seen Su Chan and Zi Yuan, who could only be seen from afar but not played with, he no longer looked at those beauties with heavy makeup who exuded the aura of prostitution. He suddenly saw this woman, and felt that her aura was very similar to that of Zi Yuan and the others. Her eyes were full of pity and indifference, as if they were gods and he, the so-called entrepreneur, was just a little bug. In the face of Zhao Yuzhen's question, the woman snorted coldly and did not speak. Zhao Yuzhen didn't like this feeling very much, but he knew that this kind of arrogant temperament could not be faked. It must have been cultivated over a long period of time. Only the real strong would have this kind of temperament, especially the woman in front of him. The arrogance between her brows made Zhao Yuzhen feel that he was standing in her territory, and every word she said to him was a kind and generous charity. Zhao Yuzhen suppressed the unhappiness in his heart and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Only then did the woman take a proper look at Zhao Yuzhen. She didn't hide her disdain at all, as if she disdained to be associated with such a person. She coldly uttered 2 words, "Zoping." It was as if saying a few more words would be a waste. Zhao Yuzhen frowned and said coldly, "What's the matter?" Zoping glanced at Zhao Yuzhen's shop, which was being renovated. She snorted and said, "Do you have a grudge against him?" Zhao Yuzhen immediately became vigilant. "What do you mean? He's just a college student who hasn't graduated yet. What grudge can I have with him?" Zoping sneered and said, "You're an entrepreneur, yet you came here to open a tea shop, and it happens to be the same as the one opposite us. Do you think I'm a fool?" Zhao Yuzhen's heart was pounding. He thought to himself, could it be that she's standing up for that bastard? Zhao Yuzhen braced himself and said, "What do you want to do?" Hey, let me tell you, don't mess around in broad daylight. Zhou Ping looked at Zhao Yogan's fierce appearance and sneered disdainfully. Don't be afraid. I just came to ask you, do you have a problem with him? Because I also have a grudge against him. So I want to see if I can cause him some trouble here. Only then did Zhao Yujin feel relieved. He was secretly happy, but the woman's indifference and contempt seriously damaged his self-esteem. He frowned and said, I don't need your help. You can go. Zhou Ping snorted and said with a sneer, with the speed of your renovation, I'm afraid it won't be finished by next year. This sentence poked at Zhao Yogan's weak spot. He snorted and stiffened his neck without saying anything. Zhou Ping chuckled and said, Why don't I decorate it for you? I'll definitely be faster than Li Yundong, and definitely not slower than him. Zhao Yujin was stunned for a moment. He looked at Zhou Ping in surprise and doubt. You! When the foreman and workers who were decorating the shop heard Zhou Ping's words, they immediately became furious. They surrounded her and scolded. You be *tch. What are you talking about? Can't you see that we are in charge of this project? Where are you from? How dare you steal our work in front of us? How shameless you are. Be careful that I don't beat you up. Zhou Ping acted as if she hadn't heard them. She just stared at Zhao Yujin coldly and said, You don't believe me? Zhao Yujin shook his head and said, No. Zhou Ping snorted coldly. She picked up an iron hammer from the ground with the tip of her foot, then pinched it with her 5 fingers, and threw it into Zhao Yogan's hand. Zhao Yujin caught it in a flurry. When he took a look at it, he immediately gasped in shock. He saw that Zhou Ping had pinched 5 fingerprints on the big iron hammer, and the fingerprints were all clearly visible. The renovation workers next to them curiously came over to take a look, and their faces immediately turned pale with shock. Some of the workers who didn't believe it took the hammer and touched it with their hands. Only after confirming that it was indeed hard steel in their hands did they believe it. They looked at Zhou Ping in horror, as if they had seen a devil. Zhao Yujin stammered. You, who the hell are you? Zhou Ping snorted and said, It's none of your business. You just need to answer me. Do you agree or not? Although the foreman was afraid, in order not to be robbed of his business by Zhou Ping, he still braced himself and stood up. However, he didn't dare to speak to Zhou Ping again. He turned to Zhao Yujin and begged, Mr. Zhao, we've already signed the contract. What do you think about this? Zhao Yujin thought for a moment and said flatly, I'll still pay you. He said to Zhou Ping, How much do you want? Zhou Ping laughed and said, Money? Do I look like someone who is short of money? I just don't like this guy. Otherwise, do you think I want to talk to you? Zhao Yujin was furious, but he suppressed his anger and said, Then how can you guarantee that you can finish before them? Zhou Ping snorted and said with a sneer, I don't need to guarantee anything. If you believe me, then believe me. If you don't believe me, then forget it. After that, she walked out of the door. Zhao Yogan's face was gloomy. When Zhou Ping was about to go out, he suddenly shouted, Okay, I believe you. When will it start? Zhou Ping said without looking back. In the afternoon. You'd better prepare for a lively opening ceremony, or I'll tear down your shop. With that she swaggered off. Zhao Yujin looked at her leaving figure and gritted his teeth with hatred. He even suddenly felt that the guy surnamedly opposite him didn't seem to be so hateful. On the contrary, this woman was simply too arrogant. Just as Zhao Yujin and Zhou Ping were secretly colluding in the shop, Zhou Qin, who was cultivating at home, suddenly heard her phone ring. She let out a long breath and spat out a clear white gas from her mouth. However, her qi was not as condensed as Li Jiandong's. When she spat it out, it was like a sharp arrow that could spray more than 10 meters away without dispersing. Her qi, on the other hand, would immediately disperse 2 or 3 meters away. Zhou Qin stood up, picked up her phone, and suddenly frowned. A familiar name flashed on her phone, Zhou Kachang. It was her father. Zhou Qin hesitated for a while, considering whether to answer the call or not. But while she was thinking, the phone suddenly stopped ringing. After a while another text message came. Zhou Qin opened it and saw that it said, Qin Qin, I have something very important to tell you. Please come back quickly. Zhou Kachang. Zhou Qin frowned even more. She knew that her father never spoke empty words. If he said it was very important, then it must be very important. Moreover, she had been away from home for so many days, and had not contacted her family. Her father had not asked about it. Obviously, he had shown great tolerance and understanding for her willfulness. Zhou Qin bit her lip gently. She held the phone and hesitated. After a while, she turned around and found a set of clothes to go out. Then she rushed out of the door. Although the relationship between her and her father had always been very cold, and even distorted, he was her father after all. Especially when it came to treating Li Jiandong. She was extremely willful. She even lost the political fate of the whole family, but her father did not blame her too much. Zhou Qin felt a little guilty about this. With a trace of worry and doubt, Zhou Qin quickly rushed home. As soon as she entered the door, she found two gray-haired elders sitting in the spacious living room. One was her father, and the other was Li Yuanbo, the secretary of the provincial party committee, who had once helped resolve the conflict between the Zhou family and the He family. When the two elders, who were over 50 years old, saw Zhou Qin, they looked at each other and pinched the cigarettes in their hands at the same time. Zhou Keqiang said with a serious expression, "Qin, come here. I have a very important thing to ask you. You must answer it truthfully." Although Zhou Keqiang had stepped down, there was no doubt that he was a high-ranking official. When he spoke, he naturally had the dignity and bearing of a superior. For a moment, Zhou Qin's heart was pounding. She thought in surprise, what on earth is it? Why is he so serious? Vote for recommendation previous page. Next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 400. Go to watch net. Zhou Qin looked at Li Yuanbo and her father, Zhou Keqiang, with uncertainty. She was like a nervous and vigilant deer. As long as there was the slightest sign of trouble, she would immediately escape. Watch net. 7K. OM. Zhou Qin looked at Zhou Keqiang and asked in a deep voice, "Dad, what's the matter?" Next to him, Li Yuanbo laughed. "Old Zhou, you scared Qin." Then he waved to Zhou Qin and said, "Qin, come here. Ignore this old guy and sit next to me." Zhou Qin had grown up in the courtyard and had a good relationship with Li Yuanbo. He had always treated her as his own daughter. She calmed down a little, walked over, sat down gently next to him, and asked, "Uncle Li, what are you up to?" Li Yuanbo smiled and asked, "Qin, answer me honestly. What have you been busy with recently?" Zhou Qin was stunned and didn't know how to answer this question. She said awkwardly, "Uncle Li, can I not answer?" "Hey." Li Yuanbo drawled and pretended to be angry. "No, of course not." Zhou Qin's heart skipped a beat. She asked tentatively, "Uncle Li, are you interrogating me on behalf of the organization?" Qin, how can you talk to your Uncle Li like that?" Zhou Keqiang said in a low voice. "If it weren't for Uncle Li, would you be able to live peacefully with your lover now?" Zhou Qin's cheeks suddenly turned red. She said angrily, "You know everything, but you still pretend to ask me. You're so annoying." Zhou Qin suddenly stood up, and Li Yuanbo, who was next to her, quickly tried to smooth things over. "Oh, sit down. Qin, why are you angry with your uncle? I watched you grow up. How come you don't even give me face now?" Only then did Zhou Qin sit down again. Although she was ashamed and annoyed, she quickly took a deep breath and secretly adjusted her qi. Slowly, the flush on her face subsided, and her whole person became as calm as water, calm and at ease. Li Yuanbo was secretly amazed. As he looked at Zhou Qin, he praised, "Qin, I haven't seen you for a while, but you've really changed a lot. This qi cultivation skill is not bad. Who did you learn it from? With your lover?" As soon as Zhou Qin heard what they said, her calmness was broken again. Her cheeks turned slightly red and she said angrily, "Uncle Li, if you say that again, I'll leave." Li Yuanbo laughed and said to Zhou Keqiang, "Just now, I saw that Qin's qi regulating skill was very good. I thought that Qin had grown up, but it turns out that she's still the same. This is the Qin I know." Zhou Keqiang chuckled. He took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and handed it to Li Yuanbo. Li Yuanbo motioned for him not to smoke. Then he took out one, lit it, and took a puff. Her temper will never change. I used to wonder which man could subdue her. Now there is a man who can, but he doesn't have a title. When Zhou Qin heard her father's words, she did not get angry for a moment. Instead, she just stared at the cigarette in his hand. Her eyes flashed, and she seemed to be thinking about something. Li Yuanbo chuckled and said, "Qin Qin, when are you going to bring your lover to us two old men?" Zhou Qin still did not speak. She looked at the cigarette in Zhou Kachang's hand in a daze. Zhou Kachang said angrily, "Qin Qin, Uncle Li is talking to you." Zhou Qin came to her senses. She looked at her father meaningfully and asked slowly, "You've been promoted again, haven't you?" This question immediately froze Zhou Kachang and Li Yuanbo. The two elders, who were used to seeing the wind, looked at Zhou Qin in shock and were speechless for a moment. It was not until the ashes in Zhou Kachang's hand fell to the ground that he asked in shock, "How did you know? Who told you?" Li Yuanbo also said curiously, "Qin Qin, you are very well informed. I've only just found out about this. How did you find out?" Zhou Qin sneered, and her smile was full of bleakness and emotion. She pointed to the cigarette in Zhou Kachang's hand and said, "As far as I can remember, he has never asked others for permission when he smokes. The only time he asked was when he accompanied me to the hospital after he stepped down. At that time, when he resigned from his post at home, even if he wanted to smoke, he would hide to the side and smoke. Finally, he still cared about my feelings. But now, he has begun to smoke again. It can be seen that he has regained the feeling of being an official and doesn't care about the feelings of others." As she said this, Zhou Qin sneered at Zhou Kachang and said, "What? You called me back today. Do you want to use your power to force me to do something?" Zhou Qin's words were like a sharp knife, piercing Zhou Kachang and making him feel ashamed. Zhou Kachang put out the cigarette in a hurry with an embarrassed look on his face, then said awkwardly, "Qin Qin, how can you say that about your father?" Li Yuanbo also sighed and said, "Qin Qin, this is also an old habit of many years. It's understandable that you can't get used to it for a while." Zhou Qin smiled faintly and said, "Rome wasn't built in a day. Don't beat around the bush. Tell me, why did you ask me to come here today?" Zhou Kachang and Li Yuanbo looked at each other. Neither of them had expected that Zhou Qin would be able to tell that Zhou Kachang had risen again from such a small matter, nor did they expect that she would show such indifference and hostility. The two of them smiled bitterly at the same time. Zhou Kachang shook his head, his face full of helplessness. Li Yuanbo smiled and said, "Qin Qin, you don't have to be so nervous. After what happened to the He family, who would dare to force you? Aren't you afraid that someone will die? You, Miss Zhou, are as unyielding as fire and would rather break than bend. I'm afraid half of the Chinese officialdom has heard of this. Who wouldn't admire you? Everyone says that you are definitely an anomaly among the children of today's officials." Li Yuanbo said again, "We asked you to come here today for a few things. The first is that the organization has reactivated your father. As for his official position, it can be considered as a promotion. However, he has been transferred to another province. The exact news of his appointment will only be released in about 10 days. We want to ask you now, do you want to take up the post with your father?" Zhou Qin's expression was calm, as if the person who had recovered was not her father, but someone who had nothing to do with her. She said indifferently, "Why would I go?" Zhou Kachang said anxiously, "What are you talking about? You are my daughter. If you don't go with me, who do you want to go with?" Zhou Qin said coldly, "That's none of your business." Zhou Kachang was so angry that he said to Li Yuanbo, "Old Li, look at this child. She is trying to piss me off." Li Yuanbo smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Old Zhou, don't be impatient. Children nowadays are very rebellious. Don't be so rude." Zhou Kachang snorted and sat in a chair sulking. Li Yuanbo said to Zhou Qin with a smile, "Qin Qin, what you said just now is wrong. Your father is going to be an official elsewhere. How can you say what you are going to do? After all, you are father and daughter. No matter how much conflict there is, it is still a blood relationship." Zhou Qin sneered and said, He is the one going to be an official, not me. Am I wrong to say that? Li Yuanbo smiled and said, You are talking about the second thing I want to say. Let me ask you, have you ever thought about entering politics and becoming an official? Zhou Qin suddenly became highly vigilant, and her eyes were full of hostility. Why, did you find me another fiancé? Zhou Keqiang stood up angrily. Are you a hedgehog? Can you still talk nicely? Zhou Qin did not show any weakness and retorted. If you hadn't found me that man surnamed He, none of this would have happened. Seeing that the father and daughter were going to quarrel again, Li Yuanbo quickly interrupted. Stop quarreling, you two. Old Zhou, sit down. Qin, don't talk back. Listen to me, your uncle. Zhou Keqiang sat down sullenly and subconsciously reached for his pocket. He wanted to smoke, but as soon as he took out a cigarette, he suddenly remembered what Zhou Qin had just said. He immediately threw the cigarette far away, making a loud bang. Zhou Qin also turned her head, her face stubborn and indifferent. She didn't even look at her father. She just stared at the door and said nothing. Li Yuanbo smiled bitterly and said, Qin, you think too much. We just think that with your talent and wisdom, it would be a pity if you don't enter politics. Look, just now, you were able to infer that old Li had recovered from such a small detail as smoking. It can be seen that your observation skills are extremely sharp, and your reaction and reasoning ability are also very strong. Moreover, you have such innate conditions. It would be a waste if you didn't enter politics. Zhou Qin was silent for a while before she said slowly, Uncle Li, if it were in the past, I would definitely not refuse your kindness, but now. Li Yuanbo quickly asked, How is it now? Zhou Qin clenched her fists subconsciously. She could feel a power that transcended mortals flowing and surging in her blood. She was no longer an ordinary Zhou Qin. She had already stepped into the threshold of cultivation. So how could she turn back? Zhou Qin shook her head and said, I can't anymore, Uncle Li. Don't ask me why. Anyway, I can't anymore. I don't want to enter politics. I just want to walk my own path. The path that Zhou Qin was talking about was the path of cultivation. Li Yuanbo and Zhou Keqiang looked at each other and thought that Zhou Qin was talking about the path of love. The two old men, who were over 50 years old, sighed at the same time. Zhou Keqiang laughed and said, See, I told you it was useless. You had to call her back. Li Yuanbo smiled bitterly and said, Young people always like to take some unique paths. Alas, if it were my children, I would definitely drive them back from this path. But you are different. You are too hot-tempered. I don't dare to drive you away. I don't want to see you lying in bed for the rest of your life. Forget it, you chose the path yourself. We won't force you. If you want to come back to this path again, remember to tell me immediately. Zhou Qin smiled slightly and stood up. Uncle Li, thank you for your concern. As you said, I chose the path. No matter how lonely it is, I will continue to walk on my own. I will never regret it. With that, she nodded at Zhou Keqiang and said, If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. Zhou Keqiang said, Don't you want to leave after dinner? Zhou Qin shook her head slightly. No, I still have something to do. With that, she turned around and walked out of the door without looking back. She was elegant and clean, without the slightest hesitation or sloppiness. Zhou Keqiang sighed. I told you, but you didn't believe me. How can she be a politician with such a personality? What does it mean to be a politician? It means compromise. Have you ever seen her compromise? I've never seen her compromise. Especially when she met that guy named Li Yundong. It's really infuriating. She comes and goes as she pleases. Li Yuanbo smiled and said, You're wrong. How can anyone be born to be a politician? Qin used to be very obedient. However, love can often change a person. Alas, this is her fate. There's nothing I can do about it. Zhou Keqiang snorted and stood up. He put his hands on his hips and said, Humph, Li Yundong, don't fall into my hands in the future, or I'll teach him a lesson. Li Yuanbo nodded at him and said with a smile, Look, you're acting like a bandit again. Before you were reinstated, you kept telling me how good this guy was. Now you've turned the tables and turned the good into the bad. You can't do that. You have to criticize him. Zhou Keqiang laughed. Just as he was about to speak, he heard someone knocking on the door. Zhou Keqiang shouted, "Come in." "Sir." A secretary in a military uniform came in, holding a roll of documents in his hand. "Chief, I've brought you what you wanted." Zhou Keqiang nodded and pointed to the table. "Put it here." After the soldier put down the file, he saluted and turned to leave. Li Yuanbo smiled and said, "Oh, what's the treasure? Let me see." Without waiting for Zhou Keqiang's consent, he opened it himself. After taking a closer look, he asked curiously, "Huh? Are you investigating Li Yundong?" Zhou Keqiang snorted. "Of course. How can I rest assured if I don't check who my daughter is following?" Li Yuanbo looked at it for a while and suddenly smiled. "Your future son-in-law seems to be in a bit of trouble now." Zhou Keqiang was surprised and asked, "What's going on? Let me see." He took it and looked at it. After a few glances, he sneered and said, "Humph, these be asterisk starts. Seeing that I've stepped down, they want to beat me while I'm down? How dare they embarrass the man my daughter likes?" Li Yuanbo laughed and said, "Old Zhou, you just said that you wanted to deal with this brat." Zhou Keqiang snorted and said unreasonably, "These be asterisk starts bullied the man my daughter likes. Isn't that bullying my daughter? Isn't bullying me the same as bullying my daughter? Humph, these be asterisk starts. Do they think that I can't stand up again once I've fallen? Humph, I want to see which blind person dares to bully me." Vote for recommendation. Previous page, return to contents, next page, error report. If you like it, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 401. Go to Watch Network. On the way back, Zhou Qin had been thinking about a question. Should she tell Li Yundong the news of her father's resurrection? For Li Yundong and the others, this news was tantamount to a reassuring pill. It could make him more at ease to do other things, and he wouldn't have to worry about being shot in the dark all day long. As the saying went, it was easy to cultivate in the six-fan school. If there was a background in the officialdom, then no matter how weak a sect was, other sects would not dare to oppress it at will. Li Yundong's current situation was that he was not afraid of the other party making trouble for him in the cultivation world, but he was afraid that the other party would make trouble for him through various means in the secular world. Zhou Qin knew her father's temper very well. Although Zhou Keqiang was overbearing and rarely thought about others, he was an extremely protective person. Although she often quarreled with him, Zhou Keqiang still loved his daughter deeply. Zhou Qin firmly believed this. Even for herself, Zhou Keqiang would more or less protect Li Yundong. With this big backer, others would have to think twice if they wanted to make trouble for Li Yundong in business and politics. But after thinking about it, Zhou Qin decided not to tell Li Yundong about this, lest others think that she was asking for credit and showing off. Just as Zhou Qin was rushing back, Zi Yuan, who was in the shop, suddenly received a phone call. When she put down the phone, she winked at Li Yundong with a puzzled face. Then the two of them stood in the corner and whispered, "Li Yundong, I have good news." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Good news? Why are you so mysterious? Say it out loud." Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "No, there's something strange about this matter." Li Yundong asked curiously, "What is it?" Zi Yuan said in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you last time that someone was blocking our necks on the documents and registered capital?" Li Yundong's face darkened. "Is it possible that someone is playing tricks again?" Zi Yuan had a strange look on her face. "No, someone from the Industry and Commerce Bureau just called me and said that all the procedures have been passed, and all the documents have been handled." Li Yundong was tongue-tied. "What's going on?" Zi Yuan said, "I don't know. He suddenly called me just now to tell me that it has been done. The last time I called, he was hesitant." Li Yundong thought for a while and said, "Could it be that someone from another sect is helping us?" Zi Yuan smiled helplessly and said, "We only have enemies now. How can we have friends?" Li Yundong asked, "Where is Du Fei? Could it be that he helped us?" Zi Yuan thought for a moment, then shook her head and said, "If that's the case, then we have to be even more vigilant. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Li Yundong nodded. Yes, I don't know what's going on. However, in general, we no longer have any worries. The thing that we were most worried about has been solved, and we can start working now. Ziyuan smiled and said, That's right. Li Yundong shouted to the little foxes, Little ones. The little foxes who were busy raised their heads one after another. Their faces were like little kittens, and they said in unison, Yes. Li Yundong laughed and said, Our various documents have been handled. There's nothing to worry about. Everyone can let go of their hands and feet and work. After he finished speaking, there was a burst of jubilation in the shop, and the little ones were all busy. Li Yundong looked at them with a smile. He glanced around and saw that Su Chan was looking out through the gap between the opaque plastic sheets on the glass window. Her little buttocks were raised high, and the tip of her buttocks was round and plump, looking very fleshy. Li Yundong quietly walked over and slapped the little girl's buttocks. The little girl jumped up with a cry and covered her buttocks with both hands, like a frightened rabbit. Li Yundong laughed proudly, as if he had done something amazing. Su Chan rubbed her buttocks with a reproachful look on her face. She said angrily, Why did you hit me? Li Yundong smiled and said, Why are you sticking your buttocks so high? The little girl suddenly forgot that her buttocks had been slapped. She pulled Li Yundong and said to him sneakily, Yundong, look. Li Yundong moved closer to the gap and saw that Zhao Yogan's shop had also been covered with opaque plastic sheets. There were people moving inside, but he couldn't tell what they were doing. Li Yundong straightened up and said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, That's what you're looking at? Do you have to be so sneaky? You're like a thief. Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, It's all covered by the plastic sheets. If I don't move closer to the gap, I can't see clearly. Li Yundong pulled her to the door, pushed it open and said, Girl, can't you look at it like that? Su Chan's face suddenly turned red. She said shyly and angrily, You're so annoying. I didn't react for a moment. Li Yundong touched her head and said earnestly, Girl, you can't come back to life if you're stupid. You should be reincarnated as soon as possible. You've been stupid enough in this life. You should be smarter in your next life. Su Chan threw herself on Li Yundong's back in exasperation, scratching and biting him. You dislike me. You really dislike me. Don't even think about it. Humph, I'm going to follow you. Even if you want to drive me away, I won't go. Li Yundong held the little girl's round buttocks with both hands and laughed. Okay, I won't go. As he said this, he carried the little girl back into the shop. In the opposite shop, Zhao Yuzhen stood by the window and lifted a corner of the plastic sheet. He looked at Li Yundong coldly and thought to himself, Humph, be proud. I'll see how long you can be proud. He looked back, only to see Zhou Ping suddenly looking at him coldly and shouting, If you dare to say a word about what you saw today, I will twist off your head. Zhao Yuzhen shivered and quickly turned his head, venting all the anger he had received from Zhou Ping on Li Yundong. He gritted his teeth, and his eyes were as cold as a poisonous snake spitting out its poisonous tongue in a dark corner. Time flew by. Li Yundong and the Fox Zen School were busy buying all kinds of tea sets, tables, chairs, and decorating the shop, while Zhou Qin was doing basic cultivation exercises at home. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The decoration of the Desanxian shop had been completely completed, because the paint used was non-toxic and had no side effects. After Li Yundong, Ziyuan, and the others finished the last decoration in the shop, they had a brief discussion and decided to set the opening ceremony for the next day. After confirming the opening time, Li Yundong and the others returned home and began to write invitations. But when they were about to write invitations, Li Yundong and the others became worried again. When others treat us, are we worried about who to invite? But if he were to treat, he would be worried. Who could he invite? Counting with his fingers, Li Yundong found that the number of people he could invite was less than the number of fingers on both hands. Feng Na is one of them. Chung Chung is also one of them. Okay, class monitor Sun Li is one of them. Li Yundong realized that he had almost no friends at school, and most of his friends were girls. He turned to Ziyuan and said, Isn't my university a bit of a failure? Wan Hongling fanned the flames and said, "You are a failure." Zi Yuan glared at her and said, "Hongling, don't make trouble. Write your invitation." Wan Hongling snorted and said, "There are only a few people in total. What's there to write?" Su Chan comforted her and said, "Yundong, in fact, you are thinking too much. You have a lot of support in school. If you want to invite someone, I'm afraid you can invite thousands of people." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Forget it. It's better not to come here to watch the fun." As he said this, he simply pulled out 20 blank invitations and mixed them with Feng Na's invitation. Let her make the decision. Let her fill it out herself. Let's not waste our time. Zi Yuan saw that the group of people had been thinking for a long time. Most of the invitations written on the invitations were from students. She thought to herself, this is not a good thing. After all, it's a big shop. How can it be without a few supporters? Zi Yuan hesitated for a moment and said, "How about I find a few people?" Li Yundong refused without hesitation. "No, I know your people very well. They either covet your beauty or have something to ask of you. If you ask someone for help, it will be exactly what they want." Hearing this, Zi Yuan didn't know why, but she felt a little warm in her heart. She smiled and said, "Not all of them." Li Yundong shook his head and was about to speak, but he saw the girl next to him stretching her head out and wanting to say something. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Chaner, if you have something to say, just say it." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong and said weakly, "Yundong, do you want to send an invitation to President Chow?" President Chow. Chow Kefi. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. Only then did he remember the beautiful and capable woman, who was so beautiful that she could cause the downfall of a city and a country. But she was also worried and sick. Li Yundong asked curiously, "Why did you suddenly think of her?" Su Chan blinked and said, "Aren't you thinking about who you can invite? I think President Chow should be considered a friend, right? Even if she's not a friend, she's still an acquaintance, right?" Su Chan's words reminded Zhou Qin, who had been silent to the side. Zhou Qin had been immersed in cultivation these days, almost ignoring the outside world and wholeheartedly practicing the Tongtian skill. Hearing Su Chan's words, Zhou Qin remembered that she still had some friends in Tianan City who could be called to support her. She opened her mouth and was about to speak, but at this time, Li Yundong said, "I won't disturb President Chow. I also caused a lot of trouble for her at the beginning. I'm sorry." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong with some confusion. "Why? I think she's very worried about you." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, little girl, I didn't call her because of you. How could I not know what Chow Kefi is thinking? If he were to provoke her, who knew what would happen? You really don't have any schemes, do you?" Li Yundong was angry and amused at the same time. He pinched the little girl's nose and pretended to be angry. "Don't say anything. I have the final say in this matter." Su Chan pouted with some flagging interest. She made an "oh" sound and lay on the table unhappily. Hearing Li Yundong's words, Zhou Qin also closed her mouth and didn't mention this matter again. But she kept an eye on it in her heart. After finding an excuse to go to the bathroom, she took out her mobile phone, which she hadn't used for a long time, and found Yin Mingfan's phone number. Zhou Qin hesitated for a moment, then sent a text message. At this time, Yin Mingfan was signing documents in her office. The phone next to her vibrated. She picked it up casually and glanced at it. As soon as she saw it, she immediately dropped the pen in her hand and dialed a number. However, no one answered after a long time. Yin Mingfan sent a text message angrily and asked, "Zhou Qin, what's wrong with you? We haven't contacted each other for so long. Why didn't you answer my call?" After a while, Zhou Qin's text message came. She said, "It's not convenient. Text me." Yin Mingfan sighed. She felt that Zhou Qin might not have answered her call because she hadn't gone to see her when she was in trouble. She felt a little resentful. Yin Mingfan sent a text message and said, "Zhou Qin, are you still angry with me? There was a reason why I didn't go to see you at that time." After a while, Zhou Qin's text message came. "I know. At that time, the He family was arrogant. It was natural for you to protect yourself. You don't need to say it. I understand. I called you today for something else. Yin Mengfan was a little relieved. At this time, she didn't know that Zhou Kechang had recovered. She just asked guiltily, "What's the matter? As long as I can do it, I will definitely help." Zhou Qin's text message replied, "Tomorrow, on the pedestrian street, there will be a Desanxian tea shop opening. It's Li Yundong's shop. I want to invite you to come. Vote for recommendation previous page. Next page, error report. If you like it, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views." Chapter 402. Go to Watch Net. Li Yundong. When Yin Mengfan saw this name, she was stunned. Who in the upper class of Tiannan City didn't know that Zhou Qin had almost been paralyzed because of Li Yundong? Who didn't know that Zhou Kechang had been implicated by him? Is Zhou Qin still with him now? How could this guy not have been killed by the He family? Yin Mengfan's mind was full of questions. She had originally thought that Li Yundong was just an extraordinary person. She had wanted to ask him to treat Shen Wangkai, but a series of things had happened later, which had left her stunned and caught her off guard. Li Yundong had also mysteriously disappeared from her world. Go to Watch Net. 7K. OM. At first, Yin Mengfan had thought that Li Yundong had been killed by the He family and had completely disappeared from the world. But now it seemed that he was not only alive and kicking, but also living a very comfortable life. This Li Yundong is not simple, Yin Mengfan muttered to herself for a while. She quickly texted Zhou Qin back. "Okay. I will definitely be there." After a while Zhou Qin replied, "Thank you." Yin Mengfan could more or less see a sense of alienation in these two concise words. She sighed secretly, knowing that her relationship with Zhou Qin could no longer be as close as before. At this time, Yin Mengfan was no longer in the mood for business. She fell into her large office chair, put her hands on her chest, looked at the ceiling and frowned. While she was thinking about something, the door was suddenly pushed open. A beautiful girl with a little baby fat on her face poked her head in and said with a smile, "Cousin, I'm here to see you." As soon as Yin Mengfan saw her, she immediately felt a headache coming on. She smiled bitterly and said, "What are you doing here?" This girl was Shen Hui. She said with a disappointed and aggrieved expression, "You don't welcome me? Then I'm leaving." As she said this, she turned her head and looked at Yin Mengfan eagerly. She said that she was going to leave, but her feet seemed to be rooted to the ground. Yin Mengfan was both angry and amused. She glared at her and said, "Don't do that. Get in here." Shen Hui cheered and rushed in. She glanced at the documents on Yin Mengfan's desk, then casually threw them away. She pulled her with both hands and shouted, "Cousin, I've been confined by the old master for half a month. I'm so bored that I'm about to die. Come out with me." Yin Mengfan scolded with a smile. "How old are you? You only know how to play." Shen Hui snorted, "I don't care. If you don't take me out to play, I'll stay here and never leave." Yin Mengfan covered her forehead with her hand and said with a pained expression, "Oh my God, don't harm me, you big devil. Go and harm others. I still have to work." Shen Hui had a mischievous smile on her face. "Then I'll go and harm Mr. Chow." As she spoke, she turned around and was about to go out. Yin Mengfan quickly shouted, "Stop. President Chow has gone to Hainan. She's not here." Shen Hui looked disappointed. "Ah, she wasn't here. Then it won't be fun." She was bored and walked around the room. Suddenly, she smiled strangely and said, "By the way, I'm going to play tricks on the handsome guys in their company." Yin Mengfan smiled bitterly and said, "Don't torture them." Shen Hui smiled slyly and said, "These guys are more pretentious than the other. They all think that they are the most handsome in the world and want to find a rich girl like me. They want to live off me. Humph, playing tricks on them is the most fun." As she said this, she rushed out like a gust of wind without waiting for Yin Mengfan's consent. Yin Mengfan groaned and covered her forehead in pain. She could already imagine the tragedy that was about to happen to Chow Kefi's company. But thinking of this, Yin Mingfan's heart suddenly moved. She picked up her cell phone and sent a text message to Chow Kefi. Feifei, are you free? Can I tell you something? After a while, Chow Kefi's text message came. She replied, I'm filming. What's the matter? Yin Mingfan hesitated for a moment, as if she was wondering whether she should tell Chow Kefi about it. After Li Yundong disappeared, Chow Kefi had frantically searched for his whereabouts all over the world. But no matter what she did, she couldn't find any trace of this boy. In the first month, Chow Kefi seemed to be haggard and listless. Work couldn't arouse her interest, and she seemed to have lost her soul. After 2 months, she slowly recovered and began to forget about Li Yundong. She devoted herself to her work again. It wasn't easy for Feifei to get out of it. What if I tell her and she falls into it again? Yin Mengfan was not optimistic about the relationship between Chow Kefi and Li Yundong. But Chow Kefi had repeatedly told her that as soon as she knew Li Yundong's whereabouts, she must tell her as soon as possible. Yin Mengfan had seen how much Chow Kefi valued and was infatuated with Li Yundong. Moreover, Li Yundong had opened a shop on the pedestrian street, and she had gone to support him. How could such a thing be hidden? If Chow Kefi found out, wouldn't she fall out with her? At that time, they wouldn't even be friends. Yin Mengfan was in a dilemma for a while. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said, forget it. If he is really your nemesis, you can't run away. Yin Mengfan gritted her teeth and sent the text message. I have something important to tell you. Chow Kefi obviously didn't know what Yin Mengfan was about to say. She replied casually, go ahead. Yin Mengfan's text message said, I know where Li Yundong is. At this time Chow Kefi, who was on the set of Sanya, Hainan, suddenly stood up from her sun chair, her face full of shock and ecstasy. She happened to pass by a staff member who was holding a plate full of wine glasses and props. The staff member was startled by Chow Kefi. The plate tilted, and the wine glasses and bottles fell to the ground and shattered, causing the people around to look over in surprise. However, Chow Kefi didn't notice it at all. She excitedly dialed her cell phone with a flushed face. When the phone was connected, she didn't wait for Yin Mengfan to speak before shouting, where is he? Where is this heartless guy? Yin Mengfan smiled bitterly and said, Feifei, look at what you're saying. He's not your boyfriend. How could he be heartless to you? Chow Kefi gritted her teeth and said, I've done so much for him, but he disappeared without a trace without saying goodbye. How could he have a conscience? Yin Mengfan groaned and said, I knew I shouldn't have called you. I'm already beginning to regret it. Chow Kefi snorted and threatened, Hey, tell me where he is. Otherwise we can't even be friends. I'll tell you. Yin Mengfan smiled bitterly and said, Okay, you're the boss. You're awesome, okay? This guy opened a tea shop on the pedestrian street of Tian'an City. It's going to open tomorrow, and he wants to invite me to support him. When Chow Kefi heard this, she immediately became angry. What? This heartless guy, why didn't he invite me? This is preposterous. Yin Mengfan regretted it so much that she wanted to slap herself. She said angrily, Hey, what are you talking about? At first, he was still my employee, and I was his boss. In terms of distance, I'm closer to him than you are. Chow Kefi said unreasonably, I met him first. Yin Mengfan was so angry that she laughed. Do you think this is a primitive society hunting? Besides, he didn't come to invite me in person. It was Zhou Qin who sent me a text message to invite me over. Only then did the injustice in Chow Kefi's heart dissipate a lot. She snorted and said, Anyway, this guy has no conscience. He didn't tell me such an important thing, and even disappeared with me. Damn it. Yin Mengfan sighed and said, Anyway, I've delivered the message. You can do whatever you want. With that, she hung up the phone. Chow Kefi frowned slightly. She didn't care that everyone on the set was staring at her in shock. She shouted at the director sitting next to the camera, Hey, Lao Lu, I have something to do. I have to leave for a while. The director looked depressed and said loudly, Hey, you're the producer. What should we do if you run away? Chow Kefi quickly packed up her things. She didn't even raise her head as she said loudly, What's the difference if I'm here or not? Aren't you the director? If I'm not here, you have the final say. Don't you want me to leave? As she said this, she turned her head and said to her assistant, who was already stunned, "Hey, book me a ticket back to Tianan City as soon as possible. Hurry up. If you delay my business, I'll fire you." The female assistant seemed to wake up from a dream. She asked in panic, "Yes, President Chow. Should I send the ticket to your room?" Chow Kefi said impatiently to her, "Nonsense, I'll go to the airport to get it myself. Just book it for me. If you don't book it when I get to the airport, I'll fire you." The assistant was so scared that she was sweating all over. She quickly took out her mobile phone and made a phone call, gritting her teeth. Chow Kefi packed up her things and waved to the people on the set. "Goodbye, everyone. I'll be back soon." After that, she rushed out in her high heels. The director shouted at her gloomily, "Hey, how long will it take for you to be back?" Chow Kefi waved her hand and said loudly, "I don't know. You can do it yourself." Just as the director was feeling depressed, a beautiful young girl suddenly rushed out of the actors on the set. She shouted at Chow Kefi, "Sister Chow, where are you going?" Hearing her voice, Chow Kefi turned her head, grabbed her hand and said excitedly, "Didn't I always tell you about a boy named Li Yundong?" The beautiful girl nodded and smiled ambiguously. "Oh, I see. Sister Chow, you're going to see your old lover." Chow Kefi snorted. "Bah, what old lover?" she said mysteriously to the beautiful girl in front of her. "How about I take you to see a real master?" The beautiful girl thought for a moment, then rolled her eyes. She giggled and said, "Well, it's good to broaden my horizons. Let's see if the guy you're bragging about is as powerful as you say." Chow Kefi was overjoyed. She pulled her out and said, "Humph, I'm not bragging. He's even more powerful. You'll know when you see him." With that, the two beautiful women, one big and one small, disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. The group of people, whether it was the cameraman, the lighting director, or the actors, all stood there dumbfounded. They looked in the direction in which Chow Kefi and the little beauty had left, and then their eyes moved to the director in unison. The veins on the director's forehead were twitching, and he looked like he was going crazy. A male actor next to him asked timidly, "Director Song, do you want to continue shooting?" Director Song was furious. He threw the director's tube in his hand to the ground and shouted, "Shoot my ass." It's okay that the producer ran away, but the leading actress also ran away. How can we continue shooting the show? I've told you not to hire a big shot, but Chow Kefi didn't listen. Now everyone can rest and wait for her. No, wait for the two women. The actors on the scene suddenly burst into an uproar and said one after another, "No more shooting. No more shooting. Let's call it a day." Someone also joined in the fun and said, Let's go and see the master." Director Song was sitting in his director's chair, panting with anger. When he heard this, he jumped up and said loudly, "Humph, master? What master? How high is he? Can he be taller than me?" Someone next to him immediately muttered in a low voice, "Even Sing Jiwei is taller than you." Although the voice was soft, everyone heard it clearly, and they immediately burst into laughter. Director Song was so angry that his face turned red, and he said angrily, "Who said that? Stand up." No one dared to stand up. They immediately scattered and flashed away in an instant. Only the director was left in the same place, his face red with anger. "Humph, master. What bullshit, master? Whoever is taller than me is a master. I don't believe that there is a master in this world." Just as the director was angrily cursing, Chow Kefi quickly arrived at the airport with the beautiful girl and boarded the return plane. As soon as they got off the plane, Chow Kefi wanted to pull the girl to Li Yundong's shop. But on second thought she stopped again. She thought to herself, "Humph, Li Yundong, I couldn't find you before. You are so mysterious. Now that you have opened a shop, I'm not afraid that you will run away. Haha, the monk can run away, but the temple can't run away." Thinking of this, Chow Kefi snapped her fingers and said, "Let's go back to the hotel." The girl was a little surprised. "Not going?" Chow Kefi pointed at her, and then at herself. "The two of us are going in this outfit? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? His shop opens tomorrow. We'll go there tomorrow. Today, we'll go to the spa and get our hair done." The girl left the studio wearing a pair of big sunglasses. She covered her mouth and laughed. Sister Chow, didn't you always say that you were born beautiful and didn't need these things? Why are you doing these things today? Chow Kefi blushed and glared at the girl. How dare you laugh at Sister Chow? Don't follow me if you have the ability. Humph. When the girl saw Chow Kefi turn around and leave, she quickly chased after her with a smile. Sister Chow, don't. I left my agent behind and came out with you. If you leave me behind, I'll have no one to rely on. Only then did Chow Kefi break into a smile. Then listen to Sister Chow. I'll take you to see a master tomorrow. The girl blinked her eyes. How high does one have to be considered an expert? Chow Kefi was stunned for a moment, and her face suddenly became a little emotional. He is as tall as the sky is. Vote recommendation previous page, return to contents, next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 403. Go to WatchNet. The next day, Li Yundong got up early. Although he was already a cultivator and paid attention to calmness, today was the first day of the opening of Desanxian. If there was a good start, it would undoubtedly greatly enhance the confidence of Li Yundong and the others. Go to WatchNet. Chinese people were superstitious, especially after Li Yundong began to cultivate. He became convinced of these things. Although he got up very early, when Li Yundong walked out of the room, he found that Su Chan and the others were already busy in the living room. Even Zhou Qin was busy going in and out. When Zi Yuan saw Li Yundong, she greeted him with a smile. You're up? Li Yundong smiled a little embarrassedly and said, I'm really ashamed. I've become the most idle person. Zi Yuan smiled and said, These guys are so excited that they can't sleep at night. They get up before dawn and start playing. You, on the other hand, are so deep in meditation that you haven't been disturbed. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Is everything ready? At this time, Su Chan said to Li Yundong loudly with a smile, It's ready. We're just waiting for you. Li Yundong waved his hand and said, Okay everyone, let's go. Today Desanxian officially opens. At this time, whether it was Su Chan, Ruan Hongling, or the little foxes of the Fox Zen school, they all cheered in unison. Hooray, it's open, Li Yundong said in a serious voice. Before that, let me brush my teeth and wash my face first. Everyone immediately burst into laughter and scolded in unison. Go, go! After Li Yundong finished washing up, he deliberately changed into a set of men's clothes that he had bought with Su Chan before. He was dressed in a suit and leather shoes, looking energetic and heroic. Su Chan also changed into the dress that Li Yundong had bought for her. She looked like a beautiful princess who was loved by all, and her beauty was amazing. Not only her, but the three Sherbois and the little foxes of the Fox Zen school also solemnly changed into formal clothes and dressed beautifully. Although Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin were not wearing formal clothes, they were all dressed in simple and elegant long dresses, like daffodils and orchids. Even Ruan Hongling, who usually didn't pay much attention to her appearance, changed into a rose-red cheongsam. The high collar and V-shaped neckline added a bit of mature charm to her. Li Yundong looked at the crowd and said with a smile, There are so many beautiful women here. Why do we need to invite guests? With you guys here, the Desanxian is shining enough, but what? Su Chan asked curiously. Li Yundong smiled and said, But I'm afraid that in the future, guests won't come to drink tea, but to see beautiful women. That will put the cart before the horse. Ruan Hongling snorted and said, Nowadays, it's about the economy of beauties, and it's also the era of the economy of eyeballs. With so many beauties accompanying you, you should be happy. Zi Yuan smiled and said, Okay, don't talk about it. Let's hurry up and set off. Don't be late. The group took a taxi to the pedestrian street. As soon as they got out of the car, they attracted the attention of countless people. Li Yundong was masculine and handsome, and his elegant aura was actually comparable to that of modern trap men. As soon as he appeared, He immediately attracted the attention of many women on the side of the road. But it was the many beautiful women around Li Yundong who attracted more attention. From Suchan to Ziyuan to Zhouqin, and then to Ruan Hongling and the people of the Fox Zen school. They were all fat and thin, but all of them were stunning beauties. With so many beautiful women gathered together, the passers-by were dazzled. They couldn't help but guess in their hearts, who are these beautiful women? Who is this boy who is surrounded by so many stars? Li Yundong saw that there were signs of a traffic jam around them. He quickly winked at Suchan and the others and said, "Let's go. Let's go to the store first. Don't cause another traffic accident." Just as they were about to move, they heard a surprised cry from the side. Li Yundong. Li Yundong looked in the direction of the voice and saw Feng Na wearing a coffee-colored dress standing in the distance. She looked at him in surprise and waved at him with all her might. Li Yundong also waved at her and said with a smile, "What a coincidence." Feng Na, wearing a pair of high heels, trotted all the way over. She first greeted Suchan and Zhouqin warmly, then nodded politely to Ziyuan, Ruan Hongling, and the other beauties of the Fox Zen school. Finally, she smiled at Li Yundong and said, "I was worried that I came too early. Your store hasn't opened yet. Hee. How are the preparations for the opening ceremony? You've been busy for a few days, haven't you?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Of course not. You know, it's just a small shop. It's just a few acquaintances of ours. It's just for fun. By the way, why are you alone? Where's Chung Chung? The class monitor? Where are the others?" Feng Na didn't believe him. In her opinion, Li Yundong was simply an omnipotent Superman. Even if he opened a small shop, it would definitely not be a simple matter. She covered her mouth and laughed. "They are busy putting on makeup." Chung Chung went to the hair salon early in the morning to get her hair done. The poor people were woken up by her before they even opened. Now several hair salons near the school are full. Li Yundong was slightly surprised. How many people are there? Is it really that exaggerated? Feng Na counted on her fingers. Apart from me, Chung Chung, and Sunli, there are about 20 people. There are only 2 hair salons near our school, and they are not big. Think about it yourself. How could there be no queue? Li Yundong asked curiously. "Didn't you say that there would be 20 people including you?" Feng Na spread out her hands and said, "I wanted to, but as soon as the news that you opened a shop on the pedestrian street spread, the school forum immediately boiled over. Everyone wants these 20 invitation cards. Do you know that someone actually bought these invitation cards for 500 yuan? Feng Na shook her head and sighed. "Alas, if I had been cruel and sold all 20 of these cards, I would have easily gotten the 10,000 yuan. Alas, how could I be so soft-hearted?" Li Yundong laughed. "Do you have to be so dramatic? But I guess you must have sold your own cards, right?" Feng Na stuck out her tongue and smiled slyly. "You found out. Thanks to you, an old man like me made a small fortune. I dare say that you will never be able to guess what kind of price the invitation that you, Li Yundong, personally wrote, sold for in the school." "Seriously?" Li Yundong asked curiously. "How much did they sell for?" Feng Na rolled her eyes and smiled slyly. "I'm not telling you. Go guess for yourself." Li Yundong pretended to be angry. "You bastard. I'm telling you, no one without an invitation is allowed in today." Feng Na laughed and said, "You won't. You talk fiercely, but your heart is very soft." Li Yundong looked resentful. "Humph. You're so arrogant. Come on, let's go. Don't you see the crowd is getting bigger and bigger?" By the time the 2 of them were done talking, the road had already been blocked by more than 100 people. Li Yundong and the others hurried along the pedestrian street. On the way, Suchan curiously grabbed Li Yundong's arm and asked in a low voice, "Yundong, can you sell such ugly characters for money?" Although she spoke in a low voice, Ziyuan, Zhouqin, and the others around her heard her clearly. Li Yundong's face turned red. He glared at Suchan and said, "What nonsense are you talking about, girl? I can sell ugly characters for money. That's called skill." Seeing that Li Yundong was a little annoyed, Suchan quickly said with a smile, Yes, my master is the most capable." Li Yundong raised his head and laughed, then lowered his head again, and carefully looked at his body, scratching and touching. Suchan asked in confusion, Yundong, what's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well? Li Yundong said with a serious face. Since I can sell a few ugly characters for money, I'm thinking that if the business of this shop goes down one day, I'll sell a few organs. At least you beauties won't starve to death. Su Chan immediately covered Li Yundong's mouth with her hand and spat. Ba 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 ba. Don't say that again. Wan Hongling rolled her eyes, shook her head and said, Look at you, you're such a good for nothing. Do you really want to die before achieving victory? Do you want to make heroes cry? Did you write the starting ceremony? Zi Yuan also smiled and said, Li Yundong, today is the first day of business. You can't talk like that. It's inauspicious. Li Yundong looked at them and then at Zhou Qin, who had been silent all this time. He said with a depressed face, My disciple is the best. You only know how to teach me. At this time, Zhou Qin said slowly, Master, I just haven't thought about it yet. When I think about it, I will tell you. Li Yundong said, You be *starred girl, why are you learning from them? Zhou Qin held back her laughter and said, I love my master, but I love the truth even more. Everyone burst into laughter. Li Yundong scolded with a smile. Do you think you are Aristotle? Even if you are, I am not Plato. The group of people chatted and laughed, and it didn't take long for them to reach the shop. Feng Na looked up and saw that the shop was 2 stories high. The second roof was covered with golden glazed tiles, and under the tiles were flying eaves and arches. There were 4 carved wooden lions on the 4 corners of the house. They were painted gold, and they were stepping on a red wooden ball under their paws. These lions looked majestic as they stared straight ahead, looking extraordinary. Feng Na couldn't help nodding and praising. Not bad, it's very bold and ancient. I feel it. She looked down and saw a row of red wooden windows on the second floor. The patterns on the wooden windows were different, but most of them were immortals in ancient China's myths. Feng Na looked at them one by one and saw familiar figures such as Nuwa, Quafu, Pengu, Taibai Jingxing, the Jade Emperor, and the Queen Mother. She had seen many magical things about Li Yundong, so she didn't think it was exaggerated. She only felt that this kind of decoration was beautiful, elegant, and refreshing. After Feng Na finished looking, she suddenly felt that something was missing. She couldn't help asking, Strange, I don't think I see a plaque. Yes, where's the plaque of your shop? Li Yundong chuckled and winked at Su Chan and the others. The little girl ran in with a smile and came out with a huge plaque covered with a red cloth. Feng Na saw at a glance that the plaque was even bigger than Su Chan's body. Su Chan was not short, but she was holding the plaque like a child. She shouted nervously, Be careful, don't fall and touch it. Li Yundong laughed and said, It's okay, it's okay. Su Chan stopped in front of her and winked at her mischievously. Then with a shake of her hand, she threw the huge plaque into the air and caught it as if it were light. She giggled and said, Don't worry, nothing will happen to it. Feng Na saw that Su Chan was playing with the plaque like a child's toy, as if it was as light as a feather. She was tongue-tied and reached out to pick up the plaque. As soon as she picked it up, she suddenly felt that the plaque in her hand was heavy. It must weigh at least 20 to 30 kilograms. Feng Na was shocked and was about to ask, but she glanced behind Li Yundong and was stunned. She asked curiously, Li Yundong, does your neighbor also run a tea shop? Li Yundong snorted in his heart and said, Yes. Feng Na couldn't help but frown. This is like fighting a drum to the other side. Is there anyone who does business like this? Open a shop across the street that does the same thing? Li Yundong said lightly. If the sky wants to rain, the mother wants to get married. If they want to open a shop, what can I do? Let them go. Feng Na suddenly said in surprise, Are they also opening today? This time Li Yundong and the others were shocked. They all looked back and saw a group of people walking out of the opposite shop. The leader was Zhao Yuzhen, who had a smug look on his face. Behind him stood a group of beautiful women in cheongsams. These beautiful women were carrying a plaque covered with a red cloth. They stood obediently behind Zhao Yuzhen with professional smiles on their faces. Li Yundong frowned and thought to himself, It can't be such a coincidence, can it? Just as he was feeling disgusted, he saw Zhao Yuzhen laughing and walking over to him. He said arrogantly and proudly, Little brother, I didn't expect that we would be so fated. We chose to open the same shop. And we also chose to open on the same day. What a coincidence. What a coincidence, ha 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 ha. Vote recommendation previous page. Next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 404. Go to Watch Net. Although he had always thought that the world was beautiful and life was happy, he also knew very well that no matter how beautiful the world was, there would always be some flies in his sight. Watch Net. 7K. OM. In Li Yundong's opinion, Zhao Yujin was undoubtedly a competent fly. He always appeared in an inappropriate situation, at an inappropriate time, and in an inappropriate manner. This guy is so annoying. Su Chan whispered to Li Yundong with a look of disgust. Li Yundong patted her arm and motioned for her not to be impulsive. He took a step forward and said indifferently, "Is it really a coincidence? How can there be so many coincidences in this world?" Zhao Yujin acted as if he hadn't heard Li Yundong's words. He glanced at Li Yundong, Su Chan, Ziyuan, and the others chuckled and said proudly, "Little brother, your renovation speed is really fast. I admire you very much. Fortunately, my renovation speed is not slow either. Hee, I just happened to finish it at the same time as my little brother. Ha ha ha." Li Yundong and the others looked at Zhao Yogan's tea house and saw that the door of the tea house was covered with floor-to-ceiling transparent glass windows. The interior and exterior of the tea house were resplendent and modern. There were 2 rows of beautiful tea attendants in cheongsam standing at the door. The slit of their cheongsam skirts was almost exposed to the root of their thighs. Wan Hongling snorted inwardly and mocked in a low voice. "This shop smells like a nouveau riche from the inside out. How can we drink this kind of tea?" Zhou Qin also showed a mocking smile and said in a low voice, "Is this a tea cellar or a meat cellar?" Hearing their words, Li Yundong smiled and agreed with them very much. He didn't want to be entangled with Zhao Yujin, so he said to him, "Mr. Zhao, you're going to open today, and we're also going to open today. Why don't we go back to our own business?" How could Zhao Yujin be willing to let Li Yundong go? He hadn't had enough yet. He quickly said, "Hey little brother, don't go. It's the first day of business, so we have to get a good start." With that, he clapped his hands, and a beautiful and slender woman in a cheongsam walked over with a plate with a stack of red envelopes in her hand. Zhao Yujin grabbed a handful of red envelopes from the plate, then carelessly stuffed them into Li Yundong's hands. He said loudly, "Little brother, this is a little gift from me. It's for good luck. You must accept it." How could Li Yundong accept it? He took a step back without batting an eyelid, then said with a smile, "President Zhao, you're too polite. I can't afford to return the favor." Zhao Yogan's hand missed the red envelope. His expression changed quickly, but he soon forced a smile. He waved his hand at the growing crowd around him, and threw the red envelopes in his hand all over the sky. He laughed and said, "Come on, today is the opening day of my shop. I want to ask for some cheers. Everyone will be happy when you raise your head and open the door." The surrounding crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. Those who had grabbed the red envelopes held them in their arms, as if they had obtained some great treasure. They turned around and ran away. Those who had not grabbed any stood where they were and cursed loudly. Some people simply surrounded Zhao Yujin to ask for more. Zhao Yujin laughed proudly and said, "The red envelopes in the morning have been distributed. We'll distribute them in the afternoon. Everyone, come on time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There will be more distribution then." The surrounding people were overjoyed and cheered one after another. Li Yundong and the others sneered. Li Yundong tilted his head and said to Ziyuan with a smile, "Doesn't he look like a landlord who gave money to beggars on the street in ancient times?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "The national character of the Chinese people has never changed. Everyone has a deep-rooted idea of being a landlord and a rich man in their bones. It's just that some people show it very obviously, and some people don't have the chance to show it. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, "Hey, whose side are you on? Aren't you scolding us as well?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Well, this guy is a vulgar nouveau riche, a landlord living in the old society. Are you satisfied now?" Li Yundong nodded and laughed. "That's more like it." At this time, they saw that after Zhao Yuzhen had distributed the money, he called a large group of beautiful women to hang strings of firecrackers from the windowsill of the tea house, and then ordered them to light them. In an instant, the street was filled with crackling sounds. Smoke filled the air, and paper scraps flew everywhere. The people who were watching the show covered their ears from the deafening sound of the firecrackers and fled far away, grimacing in pain. Even the little foxes who were cultivators couldn't help but cover their ears and frown. This burst of firecrackers silenced the entire pedestrian street. They could only hear the continuous sound of the firecrackers like thunder. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, it finally stopped. Everyone looked over and saw that the street was billowing with thick smoke. They couldn't see anyone even 5 meters away from them. Ziyuan frowned slightly and waved her sleeve. Suddenly, a soft gust of wind blew past, dispersing the pungent smell of gunpowder around them. Su Chan covered her nose, spat on the ground and scolded, "It's so noisy. I'm dying of the smoke." The little foxes also clamored, "What's so great about setting off firecrackers?" "Yes, yes." Feng Na also covered her nose with both hands and said in a muffled voice, "This guy is so annoying. He's so tacky. Doesn't he know that there are environmentally friendly electronic firecrackers now? Why did he set off so many of them? He's trying to kill us." As soon as they finished speaking, they saw a few more strings of firecrackers being hung on the second floor opposite them, and then they were set off again. Su Chan and the others' beautiful faces suddenly changed, and they cried out involuntarily, "You're still setting them off? Do you want us to live?" Li Yundong was furious in his heart. While everyone was covering their ears and frowning, he stretched out his finger and shot out a few streams of zhenqi, accurately hitting the middle of the strings of firecrackers and breaking them into 2 pieces. The remaining firecrackers fell to the ground, and after a while, there was no more movement. Zhao Yuzhen didn't know the trick, so he immediately became furious and stamped his feet. "What's going on? Why did it break? This is very unlucky, don't you know? Bastard! Hurry up and put it back together." The beautiful woman upstairs was so scared that her face turned pale. She hurriedly ran down, picked up the firecrackers, and put them up again. Just as she was about to light them, Li Yundong flicked his fingers again, and the firecrackers fell to the ground before they could even be set off. Zhao Yogan's face darkened. He roared angrily, "You don't want to work anymore, do you? Today is my opening day, but you've ruined my mood again and again. If it weren't for the fact that I don't want to be unlucky today, I would have asked you to pack up and leave immediately." The beautiful woman who had been scolded ran downstairs with a pale face. She picked up the firecrackers and ran back. When she got up, her eyes were full of tears. Li Yundong couldn't bear to see her like this. But in the end, he didn't break the firecrackers for the 3rd time. After Zhao Yuzhen finally finished setting off the firecrackers, he waved his hand and shouted to the beautiful women in the store, "Hurry up, get ready. The leader is coming soon." While he was yelling at the beautiful women to line up, he heard a few surprised voices coming from not far away. "Li Yundong, you're here." Li Yundong turned his head and saw Cheng Cheng, Sun Li, and a group of students in the school greeting him excitedly. Li Yundong was overjoyed. He waved to them and said, "Here, here." This group of people were all students of Tiannan University. Cheng Cheng was at the front. She ran all the way to Li Yundong and said with a big smile, "It took us a while to find him. If it weren't for the sound of firecrackers, we wouldn't have been able to find him for a while." Feng Na walked up to Cheng Cheng and said with a smile, "How could you not have found him? Didn't I tell you where to go?" Cheng Cheng stuck her tongue out at Feng Na. "Don't you know that I have no sense of direction?" Feng Na chuckled. "If you have no sense of direction, then do you think they all have no sense of direction?" She waved at Sun Li and the others. Among the group of people, only Cheng Cheng and Sun Li were friends with Li Yundong. Everyone else had come because of Li Yundong's reputation. They glanced at Li Yundong in awe, then looked around curiously, unable to hide the envy and admiration in their eyes. Li Yundong, you haven't been to school for a long time again. Sun Li yelled at Li Yundong. I'm going to mark you down for skipping class. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and cupped his hands. Class rep Big Sis Hero. Please, old man, have mercy on me. Haven't you seen how I cause trouble every time I go to school? Sun Li snorted. A smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Well, that depends on how you treat me. Li Yundong laughed. All right. Everyone, please come in. The group of people chatted and laughed as they made their way inside. Chung Chung looked at the tea shop across the street curiously. Hey Li Yundong, what's that shop over there? She said without hesitation. It was so lively just now. This is more like an opening ceremony. Why didn't you make it more lively? As soon as she said this, the faces of Su Chan, Wan Hongling, and the others all darkened. Feng Na quickly pinched Chung Cheng's arm. Then, she glared at Chung Chung and whispered, No one will take you for a mute if you don't talk. Only then did Chung Chung realize that she had said the wrong thing. She lowered her head and said, Oh. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan had also discussed whether the opening ceremony should be a big one or a small one. Zi Yuan felt that it was against the rules for cultivators to open a shop in a busy city. If they made a big deal out of it, it would be too ostentatious and inappropriate. It was better for cultivators to keep a low profile. Li Yundong thought for a moment and agreed with Zi Yuan's idea. So he only invited some familiar people. Everyone just wanted to have a small celebration. But he had never expected that Zhao Yuzhen would also come with him. Moreover, he was so ostentatious that he wanted everyone in the world to know about it. Li Yundong was unhappy in his heart, but he still had a faint smile on his face. He smiled at Chung Chung and said, It's nothing. We'll have fun, and they'll have fun. Chung Chung saw that Li Yundong's smile was gentle and didn't seem to be angry, so she was relieved. She said weakly, I'm a clumsy person. Don't take it to heart. Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. We're old friends. Don't be so polite. Feng Na also had an idea. She quickly tried to smooth things over and said, By the way, Li Yundong, why don't I call my master and ask them to come over for an interview? Can it be considered a form of support? Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. No, you have to keep a low profile. Don't bother with this kind of thing. Before he could finish his words, he heard Zhao Yuzhen say loudly to them, Reporter's interview? Well, I happen to have an appointment with reporters to interview the cameraman. Little brother, do you want to interview you by the way? When everyone saw Zhao Yogan's arrogant appearance, they all frowned. Li Yundong smiled and said, Forget it, Mr. Zhao. I don't have this kind of luck. I'm afraid I can't afford it. Seeing that Li Yundong had shown weakness, Zhao Yuzhen laughed proudly, as if all his previous unhappiness had been vented. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a car drive in. A young woman holding a microphone and a young man carrying a camera on his shoulder got out of the car. Li Yundong was stunned and asked curiously, Speak of the devil? When Feng Na saw the two of them, she immediately frowned and wanted to hide behind the crowd without batting an eyelid. However, as soon as the young man got out of the car and saw Feng Na, he shouted in surprise, Nana, you're here! As he spoke, he ran toward Feng Na with the camera. Li Yundong, who was standing to one side, thought to himself, Who is this person? Feng Na's boyfriend? Vote for recommendation, previous page, back to contents, next page, error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 405. Go to Watch Net. Seeing that she couldn't avoid it, Feng Na had no choice but to force a smile. Han Lin, why are you here? The young man named Han Lin said to Feng Na with a smile, I'm here to interview you. Why are you here? Feng Na forced a smile and pointed at Li Yundong. I'm here to join my classmates. Before she could finish, Han Lin interrupted her. I asked you to interview me, But you refused. It turns out that your classmates are more important than me. After that, Han Lin seemed to have just seen Li Yundong. He raised his chin and shouted at Li Yundong rudely. Hey, who are you? Li Yundong frowned secretly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Han Lin stretch out his hand and stop him. He said impatiently, Don't say it. I won't remember it even if you say it. Go to WatchNet. 7K. OM. After that, he turned his head and said to Feng Na, Hey, I'll treat you to dinner tomorrow night. You can't refuse. Feng Na frowned and was about to speak, but Han Lin didn't wait for her to speak at all. He turned around and shouted at her as he walked. It's a deal. Tomorrow night. Feng Na was so angry that she scolded in a low voice. Deal? Who cares about you? You arrogant fool. Li Yundong smiled and said, Who is this person? Your boyfriend? Feng Na rolled her eyes at Li Yundong. Bah! Do you want to shorten my life? Is there such a boyfriend? You might as well kill me. This is the son of the director of our TV station. He always feels that he is superior to others and speaks in a condescending manner. Humph, who does he think he is? Since Li Yundong had experienced the matter of young Master He had become somewhat immune to such rich and official children. He smiled slightly and didn't say anything. Feng Na hit Li Yundong on the shoulder. She glared at him and said angrily, Hey, let me ask you again. Do you still want people in this shop? Li Yundong smiled and was about to speak, but Feng Na said domineeringly, Don't say no. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, You'd better go and get together with that guy. You two are really a good match. Why don't you let me talk? His words made Chung Chung, who was next to him, giggle. She teased, Nana, don't be so ungrateful. Didn't you see that when the director's son was talking to you just now, the female host glared at you? I'm afraid she hates you to death. Feng Na pinched her with her hand in exasperation. How dare you say that? You can go find him if you're love-struck. I'm annoyed to death by this fellow, and you're still making fun of me. Why don't you go have sex with your company's perverted boss? While the two of them were fooling around, after the TV station's car drove away, another Audi A6 with the city government's license plate appeared behind the crowd and honked its horn hard. The onlookers automatically moved aside to make way for the car. Chung Chung looked at the car that was slowly driving in and said curiously, That's strange. Aren't cars not allowed to enter this pedestrian street? Wan Hongling sneered and said, Look at the license plate. This is the car of the city government, and the license plate shows that it's the mayor's car. Su Chan was still in a daze. She blinked her eyes and said, A car from the municipal government? Is it the mayor? What is he doing here? While they were talking, they saw the car stop. As soon as Zhao Yuzhen saw it, he immediately went up to it with a smile. He rushed to open the door, stretched out his hands and said loudly, Welcome, Mayor Zeng. I'm sorry I didn't go out to meet you. I'm so rude. A middle-aged man with a big belly and a suit got out of the car. He held Zhao Yogan's hand with one hand and said with a smile, President Zhao, you're so elegant. Why do you want to open such a tea shop? Zhao Yuzhen laughed and said, It's just for fun. Mayor Zeng, please come in. While he was talking, Han Lin rushed in front of him, nodding and bowing with a flattering smile on his face. The arrogant and rude young man just now was now as humble as a grandson. He said loudly, Mayor Zeng, President Zhao, look here. The young hostess was also very smart. She immediately put the microphone over and asked a lot of irrelevant questions. Mayor Zeng seemed to be very enthusiastic, holding Zhao Yogan's hand and answering a lot of irrelevant questions into the microphone. Su Chan looked at Mayor Zeng curiously. She only felt that she knew every word the mayor said. But what puzzled her was why she didn't know what he meant when he said these words together. Su Chan turned to Li Yundong and asked in confusion, Yundong, what is this man talking about? The corner of Li Yundong's mouth curled up and he said, Nothing. It's normal that you don't understand, because they're not used to speaking human language. Wan Hongling burst out laughing and patted Li Yundong on the shoulder. Not bad, you finally said something sensible. At this time, Su Chan and Li Yundong's classmates around them all burst out laughing. Li Yundong glared at Wan Hongling angrily. Are you stupid? Do you want to have a civil war? While they were talking, they saw Zhao Yuzhen and the others surround Mayor Zheng and walk into the shop. After a while, after the mayor's car drove away, another car followed, and a fat middle-aged man got out of it. President Zhao came out again with a surprised face. "Oh, Director Fong, hello. My apologies for not going out to meet you. Please come in, please come in." Then one car after another followed. The pedestrian street, which was usually empty of cars and horses, was suddenly crowded with people. The onlookers were already dumbfounded. At this time, even a fool could see that these people were all officials who had come to support someone. What kind of shop is this? I don't know. I guess the boss is very powerful. Otherwise, how could he find so many officials? That's true. But this guy can invite so many officials, so he must not be an ordinary person. Why did he come here to open such a small tea house? Hey, who knows what rich people think? Hey, do you know who these officials are? If I don't know them, who would pay attention to them? Everyone pays attention to their official hats. Who would pay attention to who's under the official hats? While the crowd was talking, another eye-catching BMW X6 suddenly drove in. Seeing the silver-gray BMW X6 slowly driving over, Cheng Cheng's eyes lit up. She stammered, "SUV too. This is my favorite." Feng Na rolled her eyes at her. "Yes, as long as it has 4 wheels, it's your favorite." Cheng Cheng couldn't help but roll her eyes at her. "I can't afford it, but can't I think about it?" Saying this, she sighed faintly. "Hey, when can I have a car like this?" Feng Na laughed. "It's simple. Find a rich man to support you." Cheng Cheng suddenly turned her head, her eyes sparkling with infatuation. She looked at Li Yundong in a daze and said, "Mr. Li, support me." Li Yundong knew that Cheng Cheng was joking with him. He coughed dryly, pointed at Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and a large group of foxes from the Fox Zen school behind him, and said seriously, "Please line up to get a number." Suddenly, Feng Na and Cheng Cheng burst out laughing. Zhou Qin blushed slightly and gave Li Yundong a resentful look, not saying anything. Zi Yuan also gave Li Yundong a somewhat unnatural look, as if she was complaining about his joke just now. Cheng Cheng patted Li Yundong on the shoulder, gave him a thumbs up and said, "Well, you're good. You're awesome. Are you going to do it again at night in the future?" As she spoke, she burst out laughing again. Her words were a little blunt. Li Yundong glanced at Su Chan awkwardly, smiled dryly, and didn't respond to her words. The opening ceremony was supposed to be a joyous event, but it had been disturbed by Zhao Yuzhen. At this time, hearing Cheng Cheng's words, the little girl felt even more flustered. She couldn't help pouting, moved closer to Li Yundong and whispered, "Yundong, let's go back." Li Yundong nodded. "Okay, let's go in, everyone." As he was speaking, he saw the other students suddenly pointing at the BMW and exclaiming, "Look! Look, it's Wang Li, the Wang Li on TV." These students all recognized her and exclaimed in surprise, "It's really her. She's so beautiful in real life." No way, the other side even invited a TV star? Is it that exaggerated? Is this an opening ceremony or a show? Idiot, is there a difference between the two? Li Yundong took a closer look and saw a woman in fur getting out of the car. The woman waved at the crowd who had recognized her and greeted them enthusiastically. Su Chan saw that the people around her had suddenly become excited after recognizing the woman. She asked curiously, "Yundong, who is this woman? She seems to be very famous." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "She's a TV star." Recently, she acted in a film and became very popular. Don't you often watch soap operas? Why don't you know her? Su Chan pouted and said, "How can it be the same on TV and off TV? There are 2 people. How can I recognize them?" Li Yundong immediately laughed and said, "That's right. You've hit the nail on the head." Su Chan didn't understand. She asked in a daze, What did I say? What secret?" Li Yundong laughed. He touched the girl's hair and said, "Forget it. It's better if you don't understand. Come on, let's go in so that we don't have to worry about these guys." Just as he was about to turn around and go in, he saw that the crowd around him had become noisy again. The guests who had entered the tea house walked out together, and surrounded Mayor Zeng like stars surrounding the moon. Then, beautiful women in cheongsams carried out plaques and pulled red ropes tied with red flowers. Another beautiful woman held a plate with a pair of scissors on it. Obviously, she wanted Mayor Zeng and Zhao Yujin to cut the ribbon together. Zhao Yujin stood side by side with Mayor Zeng. He glanced at Li Yundong proudly, his eyes full of provocation and disdain. He thought for a moment, said hello to Mayor Zeng, and then walked straight to Li Yundong. All the previous disguises had been torn off by him. He said proudly, "Humph boy, look carefully. This is the real ability of a man. What's the use of being handsome? Power is the standard to measure a man's quality." With that he swaggered off. Zhao Yogan's words made the people around Li Yundong furious. Li Yundong's eyes narrowed into a line. His face was indifferent, but no one could tell whether he was happy or angry. Yuan Hongling sneered and whispered to Zi Yuan, "I'm going to turn his pair of scissors into tongs." Zi Yuan was shocked. She quickly stopped her and shouted in a low voice, "Are you crazy? In front of so many people? How do you know that there are no people from other sects in the crowd? And the mayor is here. It doesn't matter if you provoke him, but do you know who is standing behind him?" Yuan Hongling snorted and stamped her feet hatefully. "Are we just going to watch this bastard show off in front of us?" While she was talking, Zhao Yujin and Mayor Zeng had already finished cutting the ribbon. Suddenly, 8 beautiful women began to scatter flowers upstairs like fairies scattering flowers, making it look like a wedding ceremony. Zhao Yujin and Mayor Zeng uncovered the red cloth of the plaque together. Everyone took a closer look, only to see the 4 shining golden words, "Zhao's Tea House." Cheng Qing asked softly, "Who is this Zhao?" Li Yundong chuckled. "You don't know? It's the Zhao family of orphans." After that, everyone laughed and secretly admired Li Yundong for being able to joke calmly in such a situation. This kind of bearing was really not something that ordinary people could have. At this time, the beautiful women on the opposite building worked together to hang the plaque on the second floor with red silk. The guests surrounded Zhao Yujin and Mayor Zeng and entered the tea house together. As soon as they entered the building, the onlookers around them lost their excitement and unconsciously glanced at Li Yundong and the others. Someone saw that there were so many beautiful women around Li Yundong, so he shouted, "Hey, what's the plaque you're holding? Open it and have a look." As soon as this person spoke, some busybodies in the crowd immediately followed suit. Yes, don't hide it." Li Yundong frowned and looked coldly at the bustling tea house opposite him. Feng Na and the others beside him also pulled long faces and looked very unnatural. However, Su Chan took Li Yundong's hand and whispered, "Yundong, it's okay. We'll open our own tea shop. I believe that it's our Desanxian, not this Zhao's tea house. That's really good." Ziyuan also smiled slightly and said, "Well said. We watched him build the Vermilion building, entertain the guests, and watch his building collapse. Li Yundong, don't be fooled by the fact that his upstairs is full of friends at this time. This man is arrogant and domineering. He will definitely get into trouble in the future. I believe that it won't be long before he gets into trouble." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "You don't have to comfort me. I'm fine. It's my miscalculation that I didn't treat you well when I invited you all here today. I'll punish myself by drinking 3 cups of wine later." Everyone said understandingly, "What are you talking about? Li Yundong, you're too polite." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Then what are you waiting for? Let's all go in." Everyone laughed and walked in. Zhou Qin, who was at the door, looked at her watch anxiously. She took out her mobile phone from her pocket and was about to turn it on when she suddenly saw a stretched Lincoln driving in from afar. Zhou Qin had sharp eyes and saw the license plate of the car at a glance. She immediately turned her head and shouted at Li Yundong, "Master, come and see. Vote for recommendation, previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views." Chapter 406. Go to watch net. Li Yundong turned his head and saw a Lincoln limousine driving up to the door. He said lightly, "I've been looking at luxury cars all day. Do you still want to provoke me?" But at this time, Feng Na and the others, who had already gone in, came out curiously and looked at the extremely cool Lincoln limousine. But in view of what had happened before, Feng Na and Cheng Cheng both shut their mouths tightly, for fear of provoking Li Yundong again. Go to watch net. But after a while, a young woman in business attire got out of the car. She walked to the back of the car and opened the door respectfully. Everyone's eyes widened as they saw a beautiful woman dressed in formal attire step out of the car. This woman's face was like a goose egg, her eyes were like paint, and her hair was coiled up high, giving her a dignified and noble air. In particular, her every movement revealed the aura of a lady from a noble family, causing the surrounding people to click their tongues and sigh as they tried to guess her identity. Li Yundong was stunned when he saw the woman. He asked curiously, "Isn't this Yin Mingfan, Mr. Yin?" As he spoke, he suddenly understood something and looked back at Zhou Qin. He saw a smile at the corner of Zhou Qin's mouth, but when he looked over, the smile immediately disappeared, and she pretended to be surprised. Li Yundong laughed in his heart. He glared at Zhou Qin and said in a low voice, "I'll settle the score with you later." Zhou Qin secretly stuck out her tongue, showing a rare look of a little girl. Su Chan, who was beside her, took her hand and said softly, "Sister Zhou Qin, did you invite Mr. Yin to come?" Zhou Qin hesitated for a moment. She also knew that this kind of thing could not be concealed. However, she was afraid that the little girl would think too much, so she nodded nervously. Unexpectedly, Su Chan was overjoyed. She gave Zhou Qin a thumbs up and said, "Sister Zhou Qin, you are so capable." Zhou Qin was stunned and felt a little ashamed. She smiled slightly and didn't say anything. After Yin Mingfan got out of the car, she looked around with her beautiful eyes. When she saw Zhou Qin, she immediately smiled and was about to walk over. But at this time, there was a sudden cry of surprise behind her. Zhao Yujin saw her figure and came up to her. "Yin Mingfan? Mr. Yin?" Yin Mingfan turned around helplessly and said, "Hello, President Zhao." Zhao Yujin warmly stretched out his hands. "Mr. Yin, are you also here to support me? Good, good. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. Last time, I specially invited you here, but you said you were busy. Why are you suddenly free today?" Yin Mingfan gently shook hands with Zhao Yujin, then quickly pulled her hand away. She smiled and said, "Because I'm here to attend a friend's opening ceremony today." Zhao Yujin was so proud that he didn't know what to say. Opening ceremony. Someone is going to celebrate the opening ceremony with me today? Ha, what a coincidence. Yin Mingfan turned around and pointed at Li Yunyang and the others behind her. She smiled politely and said, "This is it." Zhao Yujin suddenly couldn't come to his senses. He couldn't believe his ears. "Mr. Yin, are you kidding me? This joke is not funny." Yin Mingfan turned around and waved her hand at him. "I'm not joking. President Zhao, you go ahead with your work. I'll say hello to my friends." As she said this, she gracefully walked toward Li Yunyang and the others. Zhao Yogan's face suddenly turned red. He glared at Li Yunyang angrily, as if he couldn't wait to cut off all of Li Yunyang's flesh immediately. Yin Mingfan felt that she had let Zhou Qin down, so she was particularly enthusiastic about Li Yunyang. She smiled and said, "Li Yunyang, not bad. You're young and promising." As she said this, the woman next to her cleverly handed over a 1-foot square gift box. Yin Mingfan took it with both hands, and then handed it to Li Yunyang. She smiled and said, "It's just a small token of my respect. Please don't mind it." Li Yunyang took the gift with a smile, and then handed it to Su Chan, who was next to him. He turned to Yin Mingfan and said, "Mr. Yin, you're treating me like an outsider. Even if you came empty-handed, I would still feel proud." Yin Mingfan covered her mouth and laughed. "Really? I always felt that you were like an otherworldly master, very mysterious. Why does a master like you also value these things?" Li Yunyang laughed and said, "You can't say that. Monks also pay attention to the emptiness of worldly affairs. But look at the Shaolin Temple. Which project of face has they fallen behind? How can there be a person in this world who can transcend worldly affairs? If I really transcend worldly affairs, I will starve to death. Yin Mingfan praised him. Li Yunyang, your words are free and easy. I like them. You are so young and you started from scratch. I believe that you will definitely have great achievements in the future. When you become famous in the future, don't forget your sister. Li Yunyang cupped his hands and said with a smile, You flatter me. Mr. Yin, please come in. Yin Mingfan walked over to Zhou Qin and whispered, How is it? How did I put on such a high pedestal? I didn't give it away, did I? Zhou Qin looked straight ahead, but said in a low voice, Come on, Li Yunyang is much smarter than you think. He already saw it. Yin Mingfan was shocked and said in a low voice, No way. How did I give it away? While the two of them were whispering, Su Chan and the other little foxes were wondering what Yin Mingfan's gift was. Not only them, but even the people watching on the pedestrian street were also whispering to each other, guessing Yin Mingfan's identity. Who is this woman? She's so beautiful. I don't know. She seems to be the boss of a company. The boss of a company? So beautiful? Are you kidding me? Are you sure she's not a movie star? While they were talking, another car suddenly drove into the pedestrian street. This car was a fiery red Lamborghini that was extremely eye-catching. As soon as Li Yunyang saw the Lamborghini, he was stunned and thought, Why is she here? Feng Na, Cheng Cheng, and Su Chan all recognized this car. They were also stunned and said in surprise, Mr. Chow. Sure enough, before the flashy little sports car came to a complete stop, the hood slowly opened, revealing two beautiful women. One of them was sitting in the passenger seat, wearing a pair of sunglasses that almost covered half of her face. She was looking around curiously, sizing up everyone in the car. The woman sitting in the driver's seat was also wearing a pair of sunglasses. But after she stopped the car, she looked in Li Yunyang's direction, then took off her sunglasses, and looked at Li Yunyang with a faint smile, not saying a word. As soon as Li Yunyang saw the woman looking at him with such an expression, he immediately felt a headache coming on. He went up to her and said, Mr. Chow, why are you here? Chow Kefi was wearing a low-cut dress. She was dressed very solemnly, as if she was going to attend a large banquet. A fiery red gem was deeply embedded in her towering breasts, which set off her snow-white skin and made it look particularly charming. When Chow Kefi heard Li Yundong's voice, her body trembled slightly. She suddenly felt as if something very bright was about to gush out of her eyes. Fortunately, she had been in the entertainment industry and the business world for many years, and her emotional control had been extremely strong. She took a deep breath and forcibly stabilized her emotions. Chow Kefi looked at Li Yunyang with some annoyance, then glanced at the car door. Are you going to stand there like a fool? Li Yunyang knew that it was really inappropriate for him to disappear without a trace without saying a word. What's more, he had caused a lot of trouble in the past, and Chow Kefi had helped him settle it. He felt a little guilty. Li Yunyang said with a smile, Don't the doors of your car open automatically? Chow Kefi said angrily like a little girl. I want you to open it for me. Li Yunyang smiled helplessly and said, Okay. As he said this, he reached out and opened the scissor door. Chow Kefi got out of the car gracefully, then pointed to the girl in the passenger seat, who was looking at Li Yunyang curiously and said, And her? Li Yunyang said with a wry smile. Okay, I can open one or two. Chow Kefi smiled and said, Don't be ridiculous. Many men want to open the door for her, but they can't. Li Yunyang laughed and said, Well, I'll be a little noble today. As he said this, he walked to the other side of the Lamborghini. At this time, Zhao Yuzhen was a little dumbfounded. He stood there like a wooden sculpture, and his mind was in a mess. Why is Chow Kefi here? Isn't she shooting a film in Hainan? Who is this girl next to her? Why does she look a little familiar? Seeing Zhao Yuzhen standing aside and blocking the way, Li Yunyang said rudely, Mr. Zhao, please make way. Zhao Yuzhen took 2 steps back in a daze, still looking at the girl in confusion. The girl didn't take off her sunglasses like Chow Kefi, but she looked at Li Yunyong seriously with her dark eyes behind the coffee-colored sunglasses. After Li Yunyong opened the door, she gently stretched out her snow-white hand. Her movements were natural and natural. Obviously, she was used to this kind of scene. Seeing her stretch out her hand, Li Yundong was slightly stunned and a little confused. But he was no longer the young boy who had attended Zhou Qin's birthday party for the first time. Soon Li Yundong came to his senses. He gently held the girl's palm with one hand and said with a smile, "May I know your name?" A smile appeared on the corner of the girl's mouth, and she said softly, "My surname is Liu." Li Yundong nodded and took her to the store. After the girl nodded to everyone, she found an opportunity to whisper to Li Yundong, "Your hands are so wide and warm." Li Yundong smiled and said politely, "Thank you." The girl saw that Li Yundong was very warm to the others, but he was very polite to her. She asked curiously, "Are you and President Chow lovers?" The girl's voice was very soft, but the question she asked was very shrewd and tricky. Li Yundong smiled bitterly to himself and said seriously, "No." The girl asked again, "Then do you have a girlfriend?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Yes." The girl let out a cry. She saw that Li Yundong was looking straight ahead and didn't look at her at all. She looked at Li Yundong curiously and asked, "Don't you want to know who I am?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Who are you?" The girl gently took off her sunglasses, put her hands behind her back, and said with a natural smile, "Do you recognize me?" As soon as she took off her sunglasses, Zhao Yuzhen, who had been looking at her from outside, suddenly exclaimed, "This is Lu Feier. Why is she here?" When the people around heard this, they immediately became excited. Lu Feier. Where is Lu Feier? But there were also some who didn't come to their senses for a while and asked in confusion, "Lu Feier? Who is she?" Someone in the crowd immediately said, "Are you an idiot? You don't even know Lu Feier? She's a movie and TV superstar. Do you watch TV or movies? Are you an alien?" At this time, Li Yundong also recognized Lu Feier, but he deliberately said, "I know, you are Li Bingbing." The smile on Lu Feier's face suddenly froze. Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, "Then are you Fan Bingbing?" Lu Feier glared at him angrily, then walked up to Chow Kefi, took her arm, and whispered in her ear, "President Chow, I don't think the master you're talking about is very high." Chow Kefi smiled slightly. "How is he not high?" Lu Feier snorted. "Not high at all." Chow Kefi tried hard to hold back her laughter and said, "You'll know how high he is in a while." While the two of them were whispering to each other, a loud voice suddenly sounded outside. "Lu Feier, give me an autograph." "Feier, I love you so much." "Lu Feier, I love you." Lu Feier and Chow Kefi were shocked. Chow Kefi quickly took the sunglasses from Lu Feier's hand and put them on her face. She couldn't help but say angrily, "Didn't I tell you not to take off your sunglasses? Now it's all right. Run for your life." Vote recommendation previous page, return to table of contents, next page error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 407. Go to watch net. As Chow Kefi spoke, she pulled Lu Feier and was about to run to the door, but at this time, the door was tightly blocked. Chow Kefi saw that there was a sea of people, and there was no way to go to heaven or to hell. Chow Kefi turned to Li Yundong with a wry smile and said, "Sorry, I've caused you trouble. What should I do? Should I call the police?" Li Yundong smiled slightly. "No, I'll do it." As he said this, he stood at the door unhurriedly and opened his hands to block the way. Go to watch net. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong's figure with a pale face. She whispered to Chow Kefi, "Sister Chow, what is he doing?" Chow Kefi shook her head blankly. "I don't know." She looked around and saw that Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and the others had covered their ears with their hands, while Zhou Qin was gesturing to Feng Na and Cheng Cheng to cover their ears. Although they didn't know why, when Feng Na, Cheng Cheng, and the other students saw that all the beauties of the Fox Zen school had covered their ears, they also followed suit. What's going on? Lu Feier looked puzzled. Su Chong kindly said to the two of them, hurry up and cover your ears. Be careful not to be deafened. Chao Kefi suddenly remembered Li Yundong's roar when he had met the hooligans last time. She quickly covered her ears. However, Lu Feier said with a strange expression, is he trying to suppress them with his roar? Is he crazy? She pointed to the excited crowd outside and said loudly, what's the use of this? Can his voice drown out so many people? As she said this, she turned to Chao Kefi and rebuked, Sister Chao, you've praised this person to the sky. How high is the sky? He is as high as the sky. I don't know whether he is high or not, but I think he has a screw loose in his head. As soon as she finished speaking, Li Yundong, who was at the door, suddenly pinched his fingers and shouted a mantra in a low voice. Hey! The mantra Mahamudra not only hit people with a powerful handprint, but the mantra that gushed out also had an extremely strong deterrent and lethality. If it was shouted out in a loud and resounding voice, it could even instantly shatter people's liver and gall. In order not to cause any harm to these people, Li Yundong deliberately lowered his voice, making it sound low and deep. The fans in front of him felt as though they were being covered by a huge copper bell. Then, someone knocked on the bell forcefully. In an instant, the blood in their chests surged and their minds buzzed. They immediately grimaced in pain and covered their ears, stopping in their tracks. Chao Kefi had been shocked by Li Yundong's roar and almost had a heart attack, so she had covered her ears long ago. However, Lu Feier didn't have time to cover her ears. She screamed. Although she was the first to bear the brunt of the mantra, she still felt as if her chest had been punched and her ears had been hit by a chopstick. Lu Feier quickly covered her ears subconsciously, but there was a buzzing sound in her ears. She saw Chao Kefi looking at her with a face full of concern. Her mouth opened and closed as if she was saying something, but she could not hear a word from Chao Kefi. Li Yundong then uttered the second mantra. Ba! This mantra was like countless bells ringing at the same time. The sound was deep and long. Although it was not ear-piercing, it made everyone feel suffocated and nauseous. Some people gathered at the door shouted in pain. Stop shouting, stop shouting! Lu Feier had been shaken to the point that the blood in her chest was rolling. At this time she was shaken again. She curled up slightly in pain, frowned, and looked uncomfortable. She covered her ears tightly and screamed, don't shout! But as soon as her voice came out of her throat, it was quickly drowned in Li Yundong's voice, just like many people outside the door. It was like a wave in a raging wave, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Lu Feier soon felt a little out of breath. She breathed painfully. Just as she was about to die from the pain, a hand suddenly came from beside her. This hand rested on her shoulder, and Lu Feier immediately felt that her breathing returned to normal. The painful feeling of suffocation in her chest also disappeared. She turned her head in surprise and saw Zi Yuan, who was as elegant as a fairy, smiling at her and saying, are you okay? Lu Feier subconsciously replied loudly, I'm fine. But even she couldn't hear her own voice. Lu Feier was shocked and thought to herself, it's strange. Why can I hear her, but I can't hear myself? This sister didn't cover her ears. Isn't she afraid of the deafening sound? At this time, Lu Feier finally realized that these things and the people around her were a little strange. She turned her head in surprise and looked at Li Yundong, muttering in her heart, this guy seems to be a little magical. After a while, Li Yundong finished shouting for the second time, and then he opened his mouth to shout for the third time. The legs of the people at the door had gone soft because of his two shouts. Seeing that he was about to shout for the third time, they were so scared that their legs trembled, and they fled in all directions. Seeing that the crowd had dispersed, Li Yundong smiled, turned around and walked back. He smiled at Lu Feier, who was still covering her ears, and said, they're gone. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with her mouth agape and tongue-tied. For a moment she was speechless. Zhao Yuzhen, who was standing outside the shop and covering his ears, also stared at Li Yundong's back in a daze. The buzzing sound of the mantra was still echoing in his mind. He looked around and found that the street, which had been crowded just now, had become empty. Some of the guests in Zhao Yogan's tea house, who were leaning against the windows, pointed at Li Yundong and whispered to each other. Zhao Yuzhen was still in a daze. A beautiful woman in a cheongsam came out of the shop behind him and whispered a few words in his ear. Zhao Yuzhen answered and said, "I'll go back now. I'll go back now." Just as he was about to turn around, he saw a policeman in uniform coming over. He pointed at the Lamborghini parked at the door and shouted, "Whose car is this? Hurry up and drive it away." Seeing this, Chao Kefi replied loudly, "It's my car. I'll drive it away now." Then, she turned to Li Yundong and asked, "Where's the parking lot?" Li Yundong spread his hands and said with a wry smile, "How would I know? How could a car-free person like me care about this kind of problem?" Zhou Qin pursed her lips and said with a smile, "President Chao, let me help you park the car." Chao Kefi was overjoyed. She threw the car key to her and said with a smile, "Thank you very much." Zhou Qin got in the car and was just about to start it when Chao Kefi suddenly remembered something. She quickly stopped her and shouted, "Wait!" Zhou Qin turned her head in confusion, only to see Chao Kefi rush to the side of the car and take a gift box from the back seat. Then, she held it with both hands and smiled at Zhou Qin. "I forgot to take the gift." Zhou Qin smiled slightly, started the car, and left. When the policeman saw that there were so many beautiful women in Li Yundong's shop, he stared blankly and thought to himself, "Oh my, who is this man? This scene is so exaggerated." Chao Kefi held the wrapped gift box in front of Li Yundong with both hands and said with a smile, "It's a small token of my respect. Please accept it, President Li." Li Yundong smiled and said, "President Chao, don't laugh at me." He took the gift box and handed it to Suchan. Suchan took it with a smile and then happily ran to the side with the little foxes to guess what the gift in the box was. Although Chao Kefi had a lot to say to Li Yundong, she saw that there were more and more people in the shop at this time. It was not convenient for her to say anything even if she wanted to, so she forcibly suppressed her emotions, cupped her hands with a smile, and said, "I wish you a prosperous business and a great future." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Congratulations to you too." The arrival of Chao Kefi and Lu Feier finally made Li Yundong's opening ceremony look a little better. The classmates who had come to join in the fun all whispered to each other, "When I saw Wang Li just now, I thought that the opening ceremony across the street was very impressive. I didn't expect that Li Yundong would invite Lu Feier quietly. This is even more impressive. Yes, Li Yundong is awesome. He can even invite such a big shot and almost cause a commotion. Amazing, amazing. He deserves to be my idol. It's a pity that there are not many officials here. Otherwise, it would be even more lively. TSK, what are you talking about? How could Li Yundong know those officials? Besides, if the officials really come, what's the point? Hey, you don't understand, do you? How many officials come, and what kind of officials they are? This reflects whether the background of the boss is strong enough or not, and whether the business will be good in the future. If you don't understand this, how will you survive after you graduate? Xixiang is right. I've learned a lot. While they were talking, another car suddenly drove in on the street. Everyone looked and saw that it was a Honda, but the license plate was from the provincial capital. At this time, Zhou Qin had also parked the car and returned to the shop. When she saw the license plate, she was stunned. Chao Kefi, who was chatting in the shop, looked out curiously. When she saw it, she was shocked and cried out, "Isn't this the car of the provincial party committee?" Lu Feier and Yin Mengfan, who had put on their sunglasses again, came over curiously to take a look. They were also stunned and said curiously, "Yes, it is indeed the car of the provincial party committee. Who is it?" Li Yundong was also confused. He watched the car drive to the door, and then a short and fat middle-aged man got out of it. When Zhao Yuzhen, who was not far away, saw the middle-aged man, he suddenly shivered and cried out involuntarily, "Minister Wang?" Minister Wang looked back at him strangely and asked in confusion, "Do you know me?" Zhao Yuzhen greeted him with both hands excitedly. "Minister Wang, I went to the organization department of the provincial party committee once last year. But I didn't see you. I'm Zhao Yuzhen. Minister Wang was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he didn't remember Zhao Yuzhen. But he still shook hands with him politely and reservedly. Then, he pulled out his hand and said, "Ah, it's you. Hello." Zhao Yuzhen asked excitedly, "Minister Wang, are you also here to attend the opening ceremony of the store today?" Minister Wang asked curiously, "Are you also opening here?" Zhao Yuzhen was stunned for a moment. "Also, what do you mean by opening here? Minister Wang, aren't you here to attend the opening ceremony of my store?" Minister Wang chuckled. "I'm sorry, I'm here to attend the opening ceremony of the store opposite you." As he spoke, he turned around, bent down to open the car door, and took out a gift bag. He walked up to Li Yundong and said with a smile, "Are you Li Yundong?" Li Yundong was at a loss. He stood there in a daze and answered, "Yes, I am." Minister Wang held the gift bag with both hands and said with a smile, "I heard that your store is opening, so I specially bought a small gift. Please don't think it's too shabby." Li Yundong was stunned. He thought to himself, "Who is this person? I don't know him. Is he really not mistaken?" Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, saw that Li Yundong was in a daze and didn't know how to accept the gift. She hurried over, took the gift with both hands and said with a smile, "Uncle Wang, you've gained weight again." Minister Wang had frowned when he saw that Li Yundong hadn't accepted the gift. But when he saw Zhou Qin, he immediately smiled enthusiastically and said, "Qin Qin, you've become more beautiful. TSK, TSK. A girl really changes 18 times before she reaches womanhood. Good, good." Zhou Qin greeted Minister Wang with a smile. Her eyes quickly swept around, only to see that the people around were all staring at her in shock. She secretly nudged Li Yundong with her elbow and said in a low voice, "Are you stupid? Hurry up and greet them." Only then did Li Yundong realize that this was most likely a senior official of the provincial party committee, who had come because of Zhou Qin. Li Yundong smiled and said to Minister Wang, "Minister Wang, please come in." Chao Yi, Sherbois of the Fox Zen School, hurriedly said, "I'll take you upstairs." As she spoke, she turned around and led the way, leading Minister Wang upstairs. Lu Feier blinked at this scene and said softly, "This Li Yundong has some background." Her words made Chao Kefi and Yin Mengfan, who were next to her, tremble at the same time. Both of them were smart people, and they immediately realized the political meaning behind this matter. Yin Mengfan and Chao Kefi looked at each other and whispered in horror, "Has Zhou Kechong recovered?" At this time, Minister Wang poked his head out from the stairs on the second floor and said with a smile, "I forgot to drive the car away. I came out in a hurry and didn't bring a driver with me. Who will help me park the car?" Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Uncle Wang, let me do it." Chao Kefi shivered and thought to herself, "Oh my God, I actually asked Zhou Qin to park the car for me just now. Damn it." She quickly smiled at Zhou Qin and said, "Zhou Qin, let me do it. I was embarrassed to ask you to park the car just now. It just so happens that you're needed here. Don't be so busy." Zhou Qin smiled slightly and gave Chao Kefi a meaningful look. She didn't stop her. Li Yundong didn't react at all. He watched Chao Kefi drive away and whispered to Zhou Qin, "Hey, I don't know him. Why did he come to celebrate with me? Did you invite him?" The corners of Zhou Qin's mouth curled up slightly. She shook her head and said with a smile, "I didn't invite him. He came by himself." Li Yundong glared at her and said, "I don't believe you." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "I really didn't invite him. If I lie, I'll be struck by lightning." Li Yundong looked at her with a strange expression and said, "Forget it. You don't have to make such a harsh oath. I believe you. But who is this guy?" Zhou Qin whispered, "Wang Ke, the minister of the organization department of the provincial party committee." Li Yundong frowned and was about to speak when he saw another car driving over. It also had the license plate of the provincial party committee. The driver got out of the car and opened the door. A slightly bald middle-aged man got out of the car, holding a delicate gift box in his hand. He glanced around and saw Li Yundong. He was slightly stunned, But when he saw Zhou Qin, a smile immediately appeared on his face, and he went up to her. At this time, Zhao Yuzhen, who was across the street, almost stared out of his eyes. He recognized the middle-aged man and said, "Isn't this Director Zhang of the Provincial Department of Sanity? Why is he here?" For a moment, Zhao Yogan's expression was uncertain. He was surprised and envious, and his eyes were so jealous that they almost popped out. He couldn't understand why such a senior official would attend the opening ceremony of a young man like Li Yundong. Chapter 408. Go to watch net. Not only did Zhao Yuzhen recognize Director Zhang, but some of the officials and guests in the upper floor of his tea house also recognized him. An official by the window whispered, "The head of the organization department of the Provincial Party Committee is here. And the head of the Department of Sanity is here." Amazing! 2 senior cadres came down at once. What's the background of this opponent? Although Mayor Zeng had been sitting calmly, he was also a little worried in his heart. He thought to himself, should I go to the opposite side and say hello? He was listening to the officials next to him count the guests opposite. One of them said, "Hey, look, it's the car of the Provincial Party Committee. Wow, there's a gold star on his shoulder. Is he a Major General? Hey, isn't that Major General Luo?" When Mayor Zeng heard this, he couldn't help but be slightly moved. He thought to himself, he also has a background in the army? Amazing. Hey, here they come again. This is the car of the Provincial Commission for Discipline Inspection. And behind them is the car of the Provincial Department of Cultural Affairs. Why are there so many provincial officials here? Who the hell are they? As the official cars passed by the door of Li Yunyang's tea house one after another, the guests sitting high in Zhao Yogan's tea house couldn't sit still. They all whispered to each other, as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Go to watch net. Hey, do you want to go and have a look? Yes, there are so many bosses here. Can't you just go and say hello? What if he remembers you and gives you a hard time? What will you do then? Bah, do you think they know you? Hey, you can't say that. In China, isn't this the way to be an official? It's better to be careful. Stop talking. Let's see Mayor Zeng. If he goes, we go. At this time, Mayor Zeng was also a little shaken. While he was hesitating, the officials by the window suddenly exclaimed in unison. One of them stammered, "It's the car of the secretary of the Provincial Party Committee. Mayor Zeng, come and see." At this time, Mayor Zeng could no longer sit still. He stood up, walked to the window and looked out. Suddenly he gasped. He saw a middle-aged man in a gray Chinese tunic suit, with some white hair at his temples. This middle-aged man had a dignified face. It was Li Yuanbo, the secretary of the Provincial Party Committee. It really is Secretary Li. Mayor Zeng turned his head and ran downstairs. After running a few steps, he steadied his footsteps and straightened his clothes before quickly walking down the stairs. When the other officials saw Mayor Zeng take the lead, they also looked at each other, got up, and went downstairs. The guests upstairs were not only officials in Tiannan City, but also some business celebrities and second-tier stars in the film and television industry like Wang Li. When they saw Mayor Zeng rush downstairs, they were a little hesitant, wondering if they should go downstairs to take a look. Especially Wang Li. Originally, when she appeared, she immediately attracted everyone's attention. After all, even 100 officials couldn't compare to a movie celebrity. But not long after, Lu Feier actually appeared on the opposite side, and she was immediately defeated. How could she not hate and be jealous? But at the same time, she was very curious. What was the background of the other side? How could they find such a big star? Could it be that they were also like him, spending money to hire them? But Lu Feier was such a big star. Why would she come to such a small store? Didn't they say that she was a socialite from a wealthy family? Why was she short of money? At this time, Zhou Qin also saw Li Yuanbo. She was very surprised and said, "Uncle Li, why are you here?" Li Yuanbo chuckled and said, "What? Can't an old man like me come? Do you dislike me? Well, I'll go." Zhou Qin said in a fluster, No, Uncle Zhou, please come in. I didn't mean that." Li Yundong could also see that Li Yuanbo was not an ordinary person. This middle-aged man had the aura of a superior similar to that of Zhou Keqiang. But he was more elegant and modest. He whispered to Zhou Qin, "Who is this?" Zhou Qin said without blinking. "The secretary of the provincial party committee, the top leader." Li Yundong was shocked. He knew that if the person in front of him had been in ancient times, he would have been a high-ranking official with amazing power. At this time, Li Yuanbo's eyes also fell on Li Yundong. He looked him up and down, nodded slightly, and thought to himself, "Well, he's heroic and has some spirit between his eyebrows. I wonder what kind of person he is." Li Yuanbo smiled at Li Yundong and reached out his hand. "Are you Li Yundong?" Li Yundong shook hands with the high-ranking official and said with a smile that was neither humble nor arrogant, "Yes, hello, Uncle Li. I'm Li Yundong." Li Yuanbo felt that Li Yundong was warm and powerful, without the slightest feeling of stage fright. He thought to himself, "Well, a newborn calf is not afraid of a tiger. He has spirit and courage." Li Yuanbo knew a lot of young people, especially after knowing his identity. Almost no one could face him calmly. Li Yuanbo smiled and nodded to Li Yundong. He turned his head and said to Zhou Qin, "Qin, you have good taste." "Not bad." Zhou Qin's face flushed. She glared at Li Yuanbo and said, "Uncle Li, Li Yundong is my master. Of course I have good taste." "Master?" Li Yuanbo looked at Li Yundong in surprise and asked, "What did you teach Qin?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Nothing, just some cultivation skills." "Cultivation skills?" Li Yuanbo asked with interest. "Can you tell me what kind of cultivation skills it is?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "A flower and a leaf are the world, and every word and action is cultivation." Li Yuanbo's eyes lit up, as if he was getting to know the boy in front of him again. He took a step back, looked at Li Yundong carefully, and then nodded slowly. "Good. Well said." Li Yuanbo looked at Li Yundong seriously and said, "I've rarely seen a young man who can keep his composure like you. No wonder Lao Zhou is full of praise for you." As he said this, he looked at Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and the others behind Li Yundong and suddenly smiled. "He said that you are good at everything, but you are a little unlucky, which is not very good." After that he laughed heartily, and his voice was straightforward and cheerful. Seeing that Li Yuanbo was standing at the door and talking endlessly, refusing to go in, Zhou Qin hurriedly came over and grabbed his arm, saying, "Uncle Li, are you finished? The people behind can't get in." Li Yuanbo looked back and saw that there were indeed a few cars behind them, unable to get in. However, when they saw that the car in front of them was the number 1 car of the provincial party committee, they didn't dare to press the horn to urge them. They could only obediently block the way, not daring to make a sound. Li Yuanbo couldn't help laughing. Okay, let's go in and talk." Just as he was about to move, he heard a surprised and anxious voice behind him. "Secretary Li, please wait." Li Yuanbo frowned secretly. He looked back and saw Mayor Zheng of Tiannan City trotting toward him. Mayor Zheng's previous restraint was gone. His face was full of excitement, and he rushed forward, stretched out his hands, held Li Yuanbo's hand, and shook it hard. "Secretary Li, why didn't you tell us in advance that you were coming to Tiannan City? We didn't even entertain you when you came. How can we, your subordinates, stand this?" With a polite and reserved smile on his face, Li Yuanbo chuckled and said, "It turns out to be Zheng. You don't have to be so polite." Mayor Zheng said excitedly, No. Secretary Li is so busy. But you still took the time to come to our Tiannan City to guide the work. This is our cities." Li Yuanbo didn't wait for him to finish and interrupted him. "Zheng, you've said too much. I came out incognito today. I'm neither here to inspect the work nor to guide the work. I'm just here to attend the opening ceremony of a young man." Mayor Zheng looked at Li Yundong and said with a smile, "I could tell at a glance that this young man was talented and had an extraordinary bearing. Now that I see it, he is indeed not an ordinary person." Li Yundong smiled slightly. He didn't expose Mayor Zheng's words, but just shook hands with him politely and said with a smile, "Mayor Zheng, you flatter me." Li Yuanbo chuckled and asked Mayor Zheng, "Zheng, where do you eat?" Mayor Zhang shivered and immediately said with a smile, "Of course, wherever the leader is, we as subordinates will be." Li Yuanbo smiled at Li Yundong and said, "Shaoli, do you have so many seats here?" Li Yundong said without hesitation, "Yes, of course." Then he turned his head and said to Su Chan and the others, "Go and tidy up the tables." Su Chan sighed, then turned around and went upstairs with the little foxes. Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, tugged at Li Yundong's sleeve and whispered, "There are a lot of people. We didn't expect so many people at the beginning. I'm afraid there won't be enough tables." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Are we going to drive people out?" Zi Yuan pondered for a moment. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth curled up, and she winked at Li Yundong, motioning for him to look outside. Li Yundong followed Zi Yuan's gaze and looked out, only to see Zhao Yuzhen standing at the door of the shop in a daze, his eyes staring straight like a statue. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "There are a lot of tables over there." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "No way. Would he be willing to lend them?" Zi Yuan chuckled and said, "Would he dare not to?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "You're ruthless enough to take drastic measures, but that will offend him to death." Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, "He's finished. Don't you know that it's human nature to push a wall when it's down?" After she finished speaking, she saw almost every respectable person in Zhao Yogan's tea house rushing out. They wanted to go up to Li Yuanbo and say hello to him. Even if they didn't speak, it would be good to show their faces in front of him. But at this time, the smile on Li Yuanbo's face had disappeared. His face was dignified, making people afraid to approach him. He said to Zhou Qin, who was next to him, "Qin, your father asked me to tell you that he has already taken office and can't come to celebrate the opening ceremony of you and Li Yundong. So he asked me to send you a gift. I've said so much just now that I've forgotten it." As soon as he said this, the people around him were shocked and thought to themselves, "Sure enough, Zhou Keqiang has risen again. The Zhou family has turned over a new leaf. No wonder so many high-ranking officials and nobles have come." As Li Yuanbo spoke, his driver next to him was very clever and handed him 2 red envelopes with gold characters. Li Yuanbo took them and solemnly handed them to Li Yundong, saying, "This is a little token of our appreciation. Please don't dislike it. The gift is light, but the meaning is heavy." Li Yundong looked at the 2 red envelopes and hesitated for a moment. "Are you kidding me? The secretary of the provincial party committee is giving me a red envelope? Are you kidding me?" Seeing that Li Yundong didn't take them, the people around him immediately cursed in their hearts. "Damn it. Others don't even have a chance to get close to the secretary of the provincial party committee. You're putting on airs." Seeing this, Zhou Qin quickly tugged at Li Yundong's clothes secretly. Only then did Li Yundong take it with both hands and say with a smile, "Secretary Li, please come in." Li Yuanbo chuckled and stepped inside. Mayor Zhang wanted to follow him in, but as soon as he took a step, he suddenly remembered that he was empty-handed. How could he enter the other party's door without any gifts? Mayor Zhang quickly turned around and called his driver. The driver quickly took a gift box out of the car and handed it to Mayor Zhang. Mayor Zhang secretly wiped his sweat and thought to himself, "Fortunately, there are some gifts from my subordinates in the car. Otherwise, today would be embarrassing." Mayor Zhang held the gift in front of Li Yundong and said with a smile, "Little brother, please don't dislike it." Seeing that a dignified mayor was actually offering a gift with both hands, Li Yundong laughed in his heart. But he didn't make things difficult for him. He just smiled and said, "I don't dare. It's an honor for Mayor Zhang to come here. Please come in." Mayor Zhang was still a little nervous. He had been in the officialdom all year round. How could he not see the dirty relationship between Zhao Yuzhen and Li Yundong? He was afraid that he would be hated by this mysterious young man because he had taken the wrong side. But now it seemed that he was very magnanimous. Mayor Zhang was overjoyed and thought to himself, "This young man is really smart. Not bad, not bad." Mayor Zhang walked inside with a smile. Zhao Yuzhen, who was outside the shop, looked at him eagerly. He stretched his neck, but Mayor Zheng didn't look back. Zhao Yogan's heart was bleeding with hatred, but he hated Mayor Zheng's ruthlessness. He didn't dare to hate Li Yundong anymore. At this time, he had completely understood that he had kicked an iron plate this time. He had provoked someone he absolutely couldn't afford to provoke. In Zhao Yogan's mind, he was thinking about a few questions over and over again. Why did the Zhou family suddenly change its situation overnight? Why did I provoke Li Yundong? In China, offending an official was more terrible than offending the king of hell, especially a local businessman like him. Unless he could abandon his family and run away, it would be easier for them to kill him than to crush an ant. The more Zhao Yujin thought about it, the colder and more afraid he became. Although the sun was shining high above his head, he felt as if he were in an ice cellar, and his whole body was extremely cold. Behind him, the beauties and Cheongsams who had witnessed everything looked at Zhao Yogan's somewhat miserable back and sighed to themselves. Some of them looked back at the deserted tea house, and then at the tea house across the street, which was full of guests. They all sighed to themselves. The ups and downs are too fast. At this time, Li Yundong suddenly glanced at the tea house across the street, and then at Zhao Yuzhen. He suddenly smiled at Zi Yuan and said in a low voice, "You're right." Zi Yuan was also busy greeting the endless stream of guests. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "I watched him build a vermilion building, entertain guests, and watch his building collapse." Only then did Zi Yuan understand that Li Yundong was talking about Zhao Yuzhen across from her. She smiled meaningfully and didn't say anything. Li Yundong sighed and said, "Look at his upstairs full of guests, look at his front door. What is retribution? This is retribution. See." Chapter 409. Go to watch net. Zhao Yuzhen stood there in a daze with remorse, but Li Yundong was so busy at the door that he was out of breath. Especially after the governor visited Li Yundong's shop, the news spread throughout the officialdom of Tianan City in an instant. Almost all the officials were driving to Li Yundong's shop. For a time, there was a lot of traffic in front of Li Yundong's shop. Li Yundong just nodded and smiled, but his cheeks were a little sore. Watch net. 7K. OM. Su Chan and the others' hands were a little weak after receiving so many gifts. At first they were excited, then numb, and then even a little impatient. The little girl muttered, "Where should we put so many things?" At the side, Chow Kefi covered her mouth and laughed. "If it really doesn't work, just pile them in my car first." Su Chan turned around and looked at the mountain of gifts. Then she sighed and said, "Fine. This is the only way." Chow Kefi said with a smile, "Come on, it was quiet just now. Isn't it good that it's lively now?" Only then did Su Chan laugh. She raised her head proudly and said, "Humph, my Yundong is the best." Lu Feier suddenly came up to Chow Kefi and whispered, "Sister Chow, shall we sit down? If you don't take a seat now, there won't be any seats left." Only then did Chow Kefi realize that the upper floor was already full of people. There was a hubbub of voices, and the sounds of officials greeting and cozying up to each other could be heard everywhere. She secretly covered her mouth and laughed. "Li Yundong, how is this a tea house? This is clearly a restaurant." Lu Feier also whispered, "This Li Yundong has a very strong background. Almost half of the officials of Tianan City, the provincial party committee, and the provincial government are here. It's so scary." Chow Kefi quietly pointed at Zhou Qin and whispered, "You don't know her, do you?" Lu Feier also noticed Zhou Qin, a girl with extraordinary temperament and excellent appearance. Especially when Li Yuanbo talked to her just now, it made people feel awe of her identity. Lu Feier whispered, "The son of an official?" Chow Kefi nodded slightly and whispered, "Do you remember the girl I told you about who jumped off a building for a boy?" Lu Feier's eyes lit up. "Ah, could it be her?" Chow Kefi whispered, "Of course." Lu Feier asked curiously, "Didn't you say she was paralyzed? Why does she look fine to me now? Moreover, I always feel that she is different from ordinary people. She seems to be someone who has practiced martial arts. Her eyes are sharp, and she stands like a pine tree. The expression on Chow Kefi's face faded a little, and there was a flash of sadness in her eyes. She said softly, I don't know what happened after that, but I think it should have something to do with Li Yundong. Lu Feier asked in confusion, what does it have to do with him? Chow Kefi laughed and said, did you forget that I told you that he cured my illness? My life was saved by him. Lu Feier giggled and said, so Sister Chow is going to devote herself to me? Chow Kefi's ears turned red, and she glared at Lu Feier. Nonsense. Come on, let's go upstairs. I wonder if there are still seats upstairs. The two of them were whispering. At this time, Chow Kefi raised her head and looked upstairs, only to see 3 pairs of eyes staring at her. It was Chow Yi, Zhuang Yiting, and Lu Yueheng. Chow Kefi saw that the 3 of them were staring at her with their eyes wide open and full of shock. She was stunned and smiled politely at them. Then she lowered her head and muttered to herself, these 3 people know me? She felt strange in her heart, but she quickly threw the matter to the back of her mind. At this time, Li Yundong was also busy and shouted to Chow Kefi and the others, President Chow, I won't greet you anymore. You can find a seat for yourselves. Chow Kefi smiled at him and then said hello to Yin Mengfan. Hey President Yin, shall we go upstairs? Yin Mengfan seemed to have just woken up from a dream. She responded and looked at Zhou Qin with a complicated look, then at Li Yundong. Then, she went upstairs with Chow Kefi. As soon as they went upstairs, they saw Li Yuanbo and the others standing in front of a wooden carving on the 2nd floor with their hands clasped behind their backs, praising it and commenting on it. Not bad. The knife is vigorous and powerful, and the knife technique is elegant and otherworldly. It's a good foundation. Li Yuanbo kept nodding, his face full of admiration. Chow Kefi, Yin Mengfan, and Lu Feier also glanced at it from the side. They saw that it was a piece of catalpa, wood that was nearly 2 meters long and about 2 feet wide. It was carved with a picture of the 8 immortals crossing the sea. The relief on it was vivid and lifelike, as if the 8 immortals would walk down from the wood carving in the next second. Chow Kefi and the others were all knowledgeable people. Their eyes immediately lit up and they praised. Good, it's really a wonderful work. Lu Feier asked curiously, which master did this? It's so beautiful. At this time, Wan Hongling, who was busy upstairs, heard them and said proudly, it was carved by my Shiji. Your Shiji? Li Yuanbo, Chow Kefi, and the others all turned to look at her. Wan Hongling did not have stage fright at all. She said, yes, is there anything strange about it? Li Yuanbo smiled and said, who is your Shiji? Can you introduce me to her? This is the work of a master. It's amazing. It's really amazing. Wan Hongling glanced downstairs, pointed to Zi Yuan, who was standing side by side with Li Yunyang, and said, there, that's her. Li Yuanbo looked down and was shocked. She's so young. And so beautiful? How long did she carve it? 1 year. Half a year? Wan Hongling proudly raised a finger and said, 1 day. 1 day. Li Yuanbo laughed. He shook his head and smiled without saying a word. Obviously, he didn't believe Wan Hongling's words. The surrounding officials also laughed and said, little sister, our secretary Li is an expert in this field. You have to prepare a draft when you're bragging. Wan Hongling glared at the person who had spoken. Who's bragging? This shop was renovated by us in half a month. If you don't believe me, you can check it out. Half a month? Li Yuanbo and the others were slightly shocked and couldn't help looking around. It can be renovated in half a month? Someone looked at the paint on the table and asked worriedly, little sister, is the paint dry? Some of the paint is poisonous and needs to be left for a while before it can be used. Wan Hongling snorted. We don't need these things. These are all highly polished, and we polish them ourselves. The relief you're looking at is the same. This time, everyone was shocked. Li Yuanbo exclaimed, how did you manage to complete such a large project in half a month? Wan Hongling was stunned when she heard this. She thought to herself, I can't tell you that this wood carving was carved by Sister Zi Yuan with a magical item, and polished by my magical item, can I? Wan Hongling rolled her eyes and pointed to Li Yunyang downstairs. You can ask him. He's the owner. He let us to decorate this shop by ourselves. Li Yuanbo was surprised. Oh, Xiao Li decorated it by himself? Does he even know how to do this? Wan Hongling snorted. He doesn't understand. He's forcing us to do things beyond our abilities. He's making us work so hard every day. This sentence was very ambiguous, and some people couldn't help showing strange smiles on their faces. However, Li Yuanbo was here, so they didn't dare to say anything. They just exchanged very ambiguous glances in private. Li Yuanbo glanced at Li Yunyang, nodded and praised. Not bad. You did it yourself and started from scratch. Very good. Then, he turned to Mayor Zeng and said, Little Zeng, our government should encourage such young people to start their own businesses. Mayor Zeng nodded and said with a smile, Yes, we will definitely support you. Lu Feier looked around at the exquisite workmanship, antique tables and chairs, as well as the layout of the shop. She whispered to Chao Kefi, Sister Chao, I now believe that Li Yunyang is a little bit tall. Chao Kefi pursed her lips and smiled. More than a little. Yin Mengfan, who had been silent all this time, nudged her and said in a low voice, Don't stand there and talk. Hurry up and find a place to sit. Chao Kefi looked up and suddenly smiled bitterly. There are no seats left. They're all full. Yin Mengfan also glared at Chao Kefi and complained, You're the one standing and talking. I saw an empty seat just now. Lu Feier stuck out her tongue and said in a low voice, Let's go downstairs and sit down. There are all officials here. It feels so awkward, and some of them are looking at me with dirty eyes. It makes me so uncomfortable. The three beautiful women discussed for a while, and then went back downstairs. When they went downstairs, they saw a young man with a camera in his hand saying to a round-faced beauty, Nana, don't be like this. We are colleagues. Do me a favor. The round-faced beauty was Feng Na. She said to Han Lin in a lukewarm tone. Han Lin, just treat people the way you talked to them just now. This is the karma you sowed. I can't help you. Han Lin's face changed. He knew that he had offended Li Yundong before. If he went forward rashly, he would definitely not get any benefits. However, if he didn't film the governor, he would definitely be scolded by his father when he went back. He was unwilling to leave, so he stood at the door, his eyes flickering. At this time, Chao Kefi and the others came down. She walked up to Li Yundong, glanced at Han Lin and asked, Who is this person? A reporter? Li Yundong glanced at Han Lin and the dejected hostess beside him and said lightly, I don't know him. Chao Kefi nodded and didn't ask any more questions. She said, Hey, there are no seats upstairs. Let's sit downstairs. Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay, but there are not many seats downstairs. We didn't expect so many people to come at that time, so we didn't arrange so many tables and chairs. Chao Kefi smiled and said, Isn't it better to be bustling? It's better than being deserted, right? As she said this, she pointed to the tea house of Zhao opposite and sighed. Look, there are still red flowers hanging on the plaque, but there is almost no one in the building. How desolate and desolate. Chao Kefi didn't know about the dirty relationship between Li Yundong and Zhao Yuzhen. Her words were unintentional, but Li Yundong and the others were listening attentively. Li Yundong and Ziyuan looked at each other and smiled. There was a tacit understanding between them. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, suddenly sneered and said, There must be more guests coming later. These tables and chairs are probably not enough. I'll go to the opposite side and borrow some. At this time, Su Chan was coming down from upstairs. The little girl, who wanted to see the world in chaos, had long hated this disgusting guy opposite her. When she heard Zhou Qin's words, she immediately jumped over with joy, clapped her hands and said with a smile, Okay, I'll help you get them. Zhou Qin was encouraged by Su Chan. Without waiting for Li Yundong to agree, she turned around and left. Even when Li Yundong called her from behind, she pretended not to hear him. Su Chan, who had caught up with her, took her arm and asked in a low voice in confusion, Sister Zhou Qin, Yundong is calling you. Why are you ignoring him? Zhou Qin tilted her head and said to Su Chan with a smile, Master is the most soft-hearted. He must have wanted to punish this guy for a long time, but there are so many people here, so it's not convenient for him to say anything. So as long as I turn around, I won't be able to help him vent his anger. Su-chan suddenly understood. She giggled and said, "You're right. We'll empty his shop later." Zhou-chin pursed her lips and smiled. "We won't empty it. We have no place to put it. Just teach him a lesson." While they were talking, the two of them had already walked into Zhao Yugen's tea house. They walked to the door and went straight in, as if they hadn't seen Zhao Yugen at all. When they saw the tables and chairs, they moved them up. Both of them were cultivators and had great strength. It was easy for them to hold a heavy mahogany table with one hand. The beautiful women in Cheongsam in the tea house were stunned. When they reached the door, a beautiful woman chased after them and said, "Hey, what are you doing? This is ours." Zhou-chin didn't even look at her. She just squinted at Zhao Yugen and said coldly, "Mr. Zhao, we don't have enough tables and chairs. We want to borrow some from you. You won't be so stingy as to refuse us, will you?" Su-chan also added fuel to the fire. "That's right. Your place is deserted, and there aren't many people. It's a waste to leave it empty. Why don't you let us use it?" Zhou-chin gave Su-chan an appreciative look, and Su-chan also gave Zhou-chin a thumbs up in return. The two girls winked at each other and completely ignored Zhao Yugen. Zhao Yugen's face turned blue and red. He wanted to say no, but he really didn't have the confidence to do so. He swallowed hard, squeezed out a smile, and said bitterly, "It doesn't matter. You can take it." Humph. Zhou-chin and Su-chan raised their heads at the same time and arrogantly carried the tables and chairs back, as if they were generals returning to the court with their spoils of war. Li Jiandong and Zi Yuan looked at the two of them. One smiled bitterly, while the other chuckled. They were both speechless. Feng Na burst out laughing and gave Zhou-chin and Su-chan a big thumbs up. "Brilliant, really brilliant," she said. "This move is too ruthless and arrogant, but I like it. Who told this guy to be so arrogant and annoying before? He actually ran to Li Jiandong and said that kind of thing. Bah! Why don't you look in the mirror and see what kind of virtue you have?" However, Li Jiandong deliberately kept a straight face and pretended to be angry. "Don't you know that you are taking advantage of others' difficulties? They are already miserable enough. The guests who came to support us have temporarily changed sides. Why do you have to sprinkle salt on their wounds?" Most of the people downstairs had seen how Zhao Yugen had humiliated Li Jiandong with their own eyes. They looked at each other, as if they didn't understand why Li Jiandong was speaking up for Zhao Yugen. While they were wondering, Li Jiandong's face suddenly relaxed. He said slowly, "Although I despise this kind of behavior, as a bystander, I still feel very good watching it." At the end of his sentence, he burst out laughing. Zhou-chin and Su-chan looked at each other and smiled. They carried the tables and chairs inside valiantly and energetically. The other students of Tianan University, who had come with Chung Chung, also went to help, laughing. Feng Na scolded Li Jiandong with a smile. "Li Jiandong, what you said just now was really unkind. Do you mean that you are the good guy, and Zhou-chin and Su-chan are the bad guys?" Zhao Yugen, who was sitting opposite, clearly heard Feng Na's words. He felt as if his heart was being squeezed fiercely, and a stuffy feeling was suffocating in his chest, making him so uncomfortable that he could hardly breathe. He was angry, afraid, hateful, and wronged. As the boss of a company, how could he be humiliated like this? How could he bear it? It was bad enough that the other party had stolen his limelight, but he had even stolen his guests. Not to mention the guests, they even wanted to take away the tables and chairs in his shop. This was not the way to bully others. The more Zhao Yugen thought about it, the more painful and sad he became. Finally, he couldn't help but howl. Hearing Feng Na's words, Li Jiandong chuckled. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly heard Zhao Yugen cry. He turned his head and saw Zhao Yugen kneeling on the street with tears streaming down his face. He cried loudly, "Oh my God, I've seen bullies, but I've never seen such a bully." Chapter 410. Go to watch net. In Zhao Yogan's opinion, Li Yundong was just a poor student who had raised some money to open such a shop. As long as he casually played with him, it wouldn't take long for this annoying boy to collapse and go bankrupt. Zhao Yuzhen was afraid that Li Yundong would break down and go bankrupt. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. It was out of this mentality that the waiters Zhao Yuzhen hired were all beautiful women with high salaries that made people envious. At first, these beauties in Cheongsam thought that they had met a generous boss, especially when the opening ceremony had been very lively and glorious. Just now, the tea house of Zhao had been full of friends, and it had been very lively. The mayor had also come in person. Naturally, they felt honored and proud, so they walked with their heads held high. But for some reason, after their boss ran over to the other side and threw some harsh words at them, the whole situation changed. Their side, which was full of friends, suddenly became deserted, and the other side, which was deserted, suddenly became a boiling cauldron of voices. This was the ups and downs of life. The beauties in Cheongsam felt that their shop had been robbed of the limelight by the other side, which was already very embarrassing and depressing. There was probably nothing more embarrassing and depressing in life than being suppressed by the other side. But soon, something even more depressing happened. The other side actually came to their shop to move tables and chairs, as if they were moving their own things. This was equivalent to a prostitute being prostituted. Not only did the customer not pay, but he also robbed the prostitute. This was 2F** king ridiculous. But soon, the beauties in Cheongsam found that the most embarrassing thing was not that they were robbed after being prostituted, but that their boss was kneeling on the street and crying loudly. At this time, the beauties in Cheongsam almost broke down. Some of them even whispered in private, "Is the opposite side still hiring waiters? I want to go there." "Me too. It's so embarrassing to stay here. The boss opposite is young and handsome, and he has such a strong background. Alas, I'm willing to pay for it." "Pay for it? Wake up. Look at how many beauties there are around him. You won't get your turn even if you queue for 100 years. These beauties in Cheongsams were secretly pointing at Zhao Yuzhen behind him. Li Yundong and the others on the opposite side were also looking at Zhao Yuzhen and whispering. Li Yunyang looked at Zhao Yuzhen and suddenly frowned. He said in a low voice, "Have we gone too far?" "Too much." Feng Na snorted. This kind of people bully others when they're in power, and pretend to be pitiful when they're out of power. If you ask me, it's not too much at all. All I did was move 2 tables and chairs. If it were me, I would empty his shop, then tear down his building. Her sidekick Chung Chung nodded vigorously. Yes, yes, yes. Good idea. Li Yundong smiled and said, "You two guys are really enjoying the show." Ziyuan also smiled and said, "Yes, this guy is finished. There's no need to deal with him anymore. Aren't you afraid of lowering your own status? Moreover, where it is possible to let people off, one should forgive and forget." At this time, Zhou Qin and Su Chan, who had put down the table and chairs, also came over. The little girl clapped her hands and snorted. "Are you going to let him go just like that? He got off lightly. This guy has been going against us for more than 10 days. A smile appeared at the corner of Zhou Qin's mouth. "It doesn't matter. There will be plenty of opportunities to deal with him in the future. It's good to let him play with him slowly." Li Yundong looked at her helplessly and said, "Is this your true colors?" Zhou Qin smiled slightly, lifted her long black hair, and said lightly, "I just want some people to know that whoever wants to bully us must pay the price. Master, if it's not convenient for you to do something, then let me do it." Li Yundong shook his head with a wry smile. He opened his mouth and was about to speak when Feng Na, who was beside him, persuaded. "Oh, hurry up and let President Chao and the others sit down. They've been waiting for a long time." Only then did Li Yundong find that Chao Kefi, Yin Mengfan, and Lu Feier were looking at them in shock. Li Yundong quickly smiled and said, "President Chao, you can sit anywhere you want." As he spoke, Li Yundong pointed to the tables and chairs that Zhou Qin and Su Chan had brought back and said with a smile, "Would you like to sit here?" Chao Kefi quickly waved her hand and said with a smile, "No, no, these are your trophies. We can't sit here." She pulled Lu Feier and Yin Mengfan to a table next to them and sat down. Li Yundong smiled and didn't insist. After a while, the upper and lower floors were full of people. Zi Yuan whispered to Li Yundong, "Can we start the opening ceremony?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay." Zhou Qin also said, "Then let's invite Uncle Li to cut the ribbon for us." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Did we prepare for this?" Zhou Qin also smiled and said, "It's temporary. It just so happens that there are red silk and satin in the store that hasn't been used up yet. We can make do with it temporarily." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said to Su Chan, "Chaner, you will be the MC. You will be responsible for carrying the plates later." Su Chan blinked her eyes. "Carrying what plates?" Li Yundong smiled and scratched the tip of her nose. "Nonsense, didn't you see how they did it at the beginning? Can't you do the same?" Su Chan suddenly understood. She giggled and said, "I see, then I will go and prepare." Li Yundong patted her head intimately and said, "Don't make any mistakes." Su Chan answered obediently, "I know." After that, she turned around and ran into the storage room of the tea house. Li Yundong then said to Zhou Qin, "You Feng Na and Cheng Cheng go and prepare the red silk. I will invite Secretary Li down later." Zhou Qin nodded to Feng Na and Cheng Cheng, then turned around and left. Li Yundong smiled and said to the other students who had accompanied Cheng Cheng, "Everyone take your seats. Don't stand at the door with me. If you don't know better, you will think that you are my bodyguards." The students of Tian'an University laughed and sat down on the first floor one after another. After Li Yundong made arrangements, he whispered to Zi Yuan, "Will you cut the ribbon with me later?" Zi Yuan asked curiously, "Why did you suddenly make such an arrangement?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "If it weren't for you, this tea house wouldn't have been able to open at all. According to the shares, you have at least 35% of the shares. I also have 35%, and the others will share the remaining 30%. She shook her head and refused, saying, "Li Yundong, since you also know that this 100% is a whole, then you shouldn't say such a thing. If any one of them is missing, it will be incomplete. Think about it. When we are competing with others in the tea art competition, will it be okay without Su Chan? Will it be okay without Hongling? If I am the only one cutting the ribbon, they will have their own thoughts even if they don't say it." Li Yundong was silent for a long time. He sighed softly and said, "Zi Yuan, it's just that it's difficult for you." Zi Yuan smiled faintly. "How can it be difficult? That's not what I want. What's more, you are the only man among us. It's naturally best for you to come forward on such an occasion." Li Yundong smiled and nodded slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Su Chan suddenly rushed out of the storage room and shouted, "Yundong, we only have a pair of scissors." Li Yundong was stunned. "Just a pair of scissors? I'm afraid it's not enough, right? Is it too late to buy it now?" Su Chan blinked her eyes. "I don't think it's too late." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Find something else to replace it with. A living person can't be suffocated to death by peeing." Su Chan nodded and turned to leave. At this time, Zhou Qin, Feng Na, and the others also took out a red ribbon that was more than 3 meters long. Zhou Qin asked, "Is this long enough?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "It's enough." "Zhou Qin, go and ask Secretary Li to come down. Let's start cutting the ribbon." Li Yundong said to the little foxes, "You guys are responsible for setting off the firecrackers." When the little foxes heard this, they were immediately overjoyed. They ran to the storage room and pulled out a few bundles of firecrackers. Li Yundong said to them, "Hang them on the roof. Setting off the firecrackers later will be a good sign for good luck." The little foxes all had bright eyes and white teeth, and each of them had bright and kind eyes. Wherever they looked, the souls of men would almost be hooked out of their bodies. They responded in unison, immediately attracting the attention of many people upstairs. They saw 4 young girls, each holding a string of firecrackers in their hands. They didn't seem to make any movements, but their figures leaped to the top of the building. After hanging the firecrackers, they landed lightly like swallows. This time, the guests upstairs were dumbfounded. After a while, they let out an earth-shattering cheer. and their palms turned red from clapping. Lu Feier, who was downstairs, widened her eyes and exclaimed, "Amazing! How can they jump so high? Are they hanging wires?" Chow Kefi pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Where can we hang wires from? Do you think this is a movie? This is real skill." Lu Feier shook her head in disbelief and said, "How is that possible? They look younger than me. How could they jump so high? If they could really jump so high, they would have broken several Olympic records." Chow Kefi smiled meaningfully. "I didn't believe it before. But since I met Li Yundong, I believe that there are masters in this world." Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong's figure and said suspiciously, "Is he that high? He doesn't look like a master." At this time, Zhou Qin had invited Li Yuanbo down to cut the ribbon for the opening ceremony of Desanxian. As the owner, Li Yundong stood side by side with Li Yuanbo. Li Yuanbo had been silently observing Li Yundong. He saw that no matter who he met on such a big occasion, Li Yundong's expression didn't change. He was neither servile nor overbearing, and his every move revealed a dignified bearing. His calmness not only surpassed that of his peers, but even many old politicians who were used to great storms were inferior to him. He was secretly surprised and sighed. How did this young man cultivate such a bearing? Amazing, amazing. At this time, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and Feng Na temporarily played the role of ceremonial ladies, holding the red silk on both sides and standing gracefully. When Li Yuanbo saw that the three of them were wearing different clothes, he was immediately amused. He said with a smile, "Are you temporary guests? You're not professional." Ziyuan smiled slightly, like a breeze caressing her face. Feng Na was a little nervous. How could she dare to answer the words of the secretary of the provincial party committee? Only Zhou Qin said with a smile, "Uncle Li, the decoration workers are professional enough, right? But their decoration is not as good as ours. These days, it's about being specialized in many things." Li Yuanbo pointed at Zhou Qin and said with a smile, "Little girl, you have a sharp tongue." Then he said to Li Yundong with a smile, "Shaoli, you want me to cut the ribbon, but where are the scissors?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "I'll be right there." Then, he turned his head and shouted into the storage room, "Su-chan, have you found it?" I'm coming." Before Su-chan appeared, her voice floated out from inside. Not long after, she hurried out with a plate covered with 2 pieces of red cloth. Li Yuanbo saw that Su-chan was beautiful and charming, especially when she was in a hurry. He couldn't help laughing and said, "What a beautiful girl. Don't worry, don't fall." Su-chan glanced at Li Yuanbo and smiled. She raised the plate and said, "Secretary Li, please remove the red silk cloth on the right." Li Yuanbo saw that there were 2 pieces of red cloth on the plate. He smiled and said, "Oh, what custom is this?" As he said this, he lifted the red silk cloth and saw a pair of scissors lying inside. He picked it up with a smile. Su-chan brought the plate back to Li Yundong and kept winking at him. Li Yundong felt strange when he saw Su-chan's strange behavior, so he asked in a low voice, "Chaner, what's wrong with you?" Su-chan opened her mouth and was about to speak when she saw Li Yuanbo looking at Li Yundong in confusion. He asked, "Shaoli, why don't you take off the cloth?" Su-chan immediately shut her mouth, stared at the red cloth, and kept winking at Li Yundong. Li Yundong saw the little girl's behavior and thought that she wanted him to remove the red cloth quickly, so he removed it without saying a word. Once it was removed, it would be terrible. Su-chan suddenly lowered her head with a painful expression, while Li Yundong was dumbfounded and his eyes were wide open. He saw a file lying quietly on the plate. Li Yuanbo, who was standing to one side, saw Li Yundong in a daze. He glanced at him curiously and was immediately stunned. The secretary of the provincial party committee, who had experienced countless storms and seen countless big scenes, was stunned on the spot and couldn't say a word. Li Yundong picked up the 7-inch-long file from the plate with trembling hands and stammered, What is this?" Su-chan lowered her head, and her chin almost touched her chest. She said in a muffled voice, File. Li Yundong looked like he was going crazy. "Didn't I ask you to find a replacement? Even a knife would do. What did you find? Can this be used to cut the ribbon?" Su Chan looked up at Li Yundong and muttered in a low voice. A file is also a knife. Li Yundong almost broke down. He said, a file is also a knife? Is a kumquat also an orange? Is a Wangzai steamed bun also a steamed bun? Vote recommendation previous page, return to table of contents, next page error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 411. Go to Watch Net. Zhou Qin, Ziyuan and Feng Na, who were serving as the etiquette girls, were embarrassed and wanted to laugh at the same time. Go to Watch Net. 7K. OM. However, they didn't dare to laugh at the scene in front of them, so they had to force themselves to hold it in. All of them looked straight ahead, gritted their teeth, and tightened their faces with bitter and hateful expressions. Li Yundong's classic joke about files and kumquats suddenly made Zhou Qin and Feng Na burst out laughing at the same time, but they quickly held it back. Their faces were tense, and the corners of their mouths twitched. Only Ziyuan was the calmest. She looked up at the sky with a calm face, but only Wan Hongling, who was the most familiar with her, noticed that Ziyuan's hand was holding the silk quite hard, and her shoulders were shaking slightly, as if she couldn't help laughing. Li Yundong's shout made the girl lower her head. She looked aggrieved and whispered, I can't find anything else to replace it. Who told you to rush me? Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. Well, now it was his fault. Li Yuanbo also tried to hold back his laughter and said, Xiaoli, what's the problem? Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, Secretary Li, it's nothing. Let's cut the ribbon as usual. Li Yuanbo pointed to the file in Li Yundong's hand and laughed. I've cut ribbons many times, but this is the first time I've seen someone cut the ribbon with such a thing. Creative. When Li Yundong heard this, he suddenly had an idea. He smiled and said, Secretary Li, do you mind if I show you a little trick? Li Yuanbo asked curiously, a little trick? Xiaoli, you can do tricks? Li Yundong smiled and said, Of course, a little trick can't enter your eyes. It's just to make you smile. Li Yuanbo laughed and said, Then let's see what kind of trick it is. Li Yundong raised the file in his hand and handed it to Li Yuanbo. Secretary Li, take a look. Is this a file? Li Yuanbo immediately laughed. No need to look. It's a file. Li Yundong smiled and said, Since it is a file, do you think it can cut this silk? No. Li Yuanbo laughed. Li Yundong nodded. Since Mr. Li thinks that it's just a file and can't cut this silk, what do you guys think? With that, he raised the file high in the air and showed it to the people upstairs and downstairs. At this time, the people upstairs and downstairs were looking at him. Someone shouted, It's file, we saw it clearly. Lu Feier also whispered to Chow Kefi, Sister Chow, what's wrong with this guy? What are you trying to do with that file? Chow Kefi gently slapped her hand and stared at Li Yundong. She said in a low voice, Don't talk. Pay attention. Lu Feier wrinkled her nose and snorted. She opened her eyes wide and looked at Li Yundong seriously. Li Yundong put the file under the red silk in front of everyone and said with a smile, In fact, this file is a peerless sword. As long as I gently pull the red cloth, this file will cut it. Li Yuanbo laughed and said, Oh? Is it really that amazing? Su Chan also stared at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. She couldn't figure out what Li Yundong was up to. Not only her, but Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, Feng Na, and everyone else also held their breath and stared at Li Yundong, wanting to see what kind of trick he was going to perform. They saw Li Yundong holding the file in one hand and the red cloth in the other. He took a deep breath, then suddenly shouted and stamped his foot. The people upstairs and downstairs only felt that Li Yundong's loud shout made them feel a little stuffy and dizzy for a moment. Especially when Li Yundong stamped his foot, the ground trembled slightly. Everyone was caught off guard and was startled. When they came to their senses again, they saw that the red silk in Li Yundong's hand had been cut in two. Li Yuanbo, who was closest to Li Yundong, only felt a blur in front of his eyes. A white light flashed, and the red cloth was cut in two. The incision was extremely smooth, and the cut was exactly where the file was. Li Yuanbo stared at the file in Li Yundong's hand for a second or two, then suddenly smiled and said, "It is indeed a peerless sword. Good, good." At this time, everyone also cheered and nodded secretly. Some of them were cheering for Li Yundong's little trick, while others were cheering for Li Yundong's improvisation. Only Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, Zhou Qin, and the cultivators of the Fox Zen school understood that Li Yundong had used the moment of shouting and stamping his foot to attract the attention of others. At the same time, he had used the liuhe to cut the red silk in an instant. However, the speed of the liuhe was extremely fast, almost beyond the range that people could see with the naked eye. Others only saw a flash of white light and thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. But in fact, Li Yundong was skilled and bold. He had actually shown his sword in front of the governor. Zi Yuan saw this and frowned secretly. Her heart was pounding because of Li Yundong. She thought to herself, Li Yundong is really getting bolder and bolder. Last time, he struck Mount Longhu with lightning. This time, he actually played with fire in front of the secretary of the provincial party committee. I really don't know what kind of trouble he will cause next time. Su Chan didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Seeing that Li Yundong had resolved the storm while talking and laughing, she immediately admired Li Yundong to the extreme. She looked at Li Yundong with admiration and said softly, "Master, you are so amazing. I love you so much." Li Yundong glared at her secretly and whispered, "Hurry up and go down." Su Chan blinked and whispered, "Secretary Li hasn't cut the ribbon yet." Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He smiled at Li Yuanbo and said, "Secretary Li, I was so focused on the magic trick that I forgot to cut the ribbon. I actually cut it before you. I'm really sorry." Li Yuanbo laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. You are the owner, so I can't steal the show, can I?" As he said this, he casually cut the red silk in half with a pair of scissors. Seeing that the two of them had finished cutting the ribbon, everyone applauded at the same time and celebrated. At this time, Su Chan quickly put away the red silk, then made a face at Li Yundong, and quickly ran into the storage room. Li Yundong looked at the little girl helplessly and shook his head secretly. He thought to himself, "This girl is really unruly. She actually came up with such a trick at this time. Fortunately, I reacted quickly, or I would have made a fool of myself." While he was thinking, Li Yuanbo smiled and said to Li Yundong, "Shaoli, can you give me the peerless sword in your hand?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course." As he said this, he handed it over with both hands. After taking the file, Li Yuanbo played with it for a while and said with a smile, "Interesting, really interesting." Li Yundong was a little puzzled. What hasn't Secretary Li seen before? Why is he so interested in this small file? Li Yuanbo played with the file for a while, then suddenly said to Li Yundong, "By the way, I still don't know the name of your shop. Where is the plaque of your shop? It hasn't hung up yet, has it?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I was just about to ask Secretary Li to unveil the plaque." Li Yuanbo also smiled and said, "I've touched all the good things. You can't speak ill of an old man like me behind my back." Li Yundong saw that as a senior official of the provincial party committee, Li Yuanbo didn't put on any airs at all. He was humorous and amiable. He was secretly surprised and didn't say anything for a while. Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Uncle Li, it's what we want for you to unveil the plaque. Don't talk so much. Hurry up and unveil the plaque. We've been waiting for so long." Li Yuanbo smiled and said, "Okay, then I won't waste any more time." As he said this, he smiled at Li Yundong and said, "Shaoli, would you like to join us?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then I'll do as you say." At this time, Ruan Hongling and Zi Yuan took the opportunity to take out the plaque. Li Yundong and Li Yuanbo walked to the plaque and opened it together. Li Yuanbo took a closer look and saw 3 big words written on the plaque, "Dissanxian." Li Yuanbo's eyes suddenly lit up and he shouted, "Good calligraphy, really good calligraphy. Which master wrote it?" Li Yundong smiled and pointed to Zi Yuan beside him, saying, "This is the work of Zi Yuan, the second owner of Dissanxian." Li Yuanbo looked at Zi Yuan in shock and cried out involuntarily. The 8 immortals painting upstairs was also carved by you? Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, Yes, I did. Li Yuanbo's eyes widened, and he kept shaking his head. Incredible, it's really incredible. You are so young. How did you practice your kung fu? Zi Yuan smiled slightly. Her smile was elegant and dignified, like that of Guanyin in the world. It was amazing, but no one dared to offend her in the slightest. She said, In everything, cultivation is not based on time, but on one's heart. If the heart is there, the kung fu will be there. If the heart is not there, the kung fu will not be there. Li Yuanbo was suddenly moved. He said solemnly, Well said, Master Zi Yuan. I will remember your words. As he said this, he turned his head and said to Li Yundong, Shaoli, I didn't expect to see an immortal here today. I didn't come in vain. Li Yundong asked knowingly, Where are the immortals? Li Yuanbo laughed and pointed to Zi Yuan. Isn't this it? A celestial appearance, celestial calligraphy, and celestial paintings. If this isn't a living celestial, then what is it? Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, knew that Li Yuanbo was very shrewd and didn't praise people easily. At this time, he had given Zi Yuan such an evaluation. Obviously, he admired her to the extreme. She secretly admired him. But at the same time, she was a little unconvinced. She was eager to have a try and compete with him in the future. Li Yundong didn't know what Zhou Qin was thinking. He smiled and said, Secretary Li, please sit inside. I'll hang this plaque up. Li Yuanbo smiled and said, Okay, hang it up quickly and let me have a look. As he said this, he looked at the people around him and said, Hurry up and take this plaque upstairs. Do you want to use a ladder or a rope? As he spoke, he saw that Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and Zhou Qin were all standing still. Zhou Qin smiled and said, Uncle Li, Li Yundong can do it alone. Li Yuanbo glared at her reproachfully and said, What nonsense are you talking about? This plaque is made of mahogany and is very heavy. I'm afraid it weighs more than 40 kilograms. How can one person carry it up? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Li Yundong suddenly grab the plaque with his hand. Then, he shook his arm and slapped the bottom of the plaque with his palm. The plaque flew up and hung right in the middle of the tea house. Li Yundong's move was neat and elegant. All the people who saw it immediately cheered. Lu Feier, who was slowly eating snacks, also suddenly widened her eyes, and the snacks in her hand fell to the ground. She said while stuttering, So handsome. Chow Kefi snorted proudly, as if she had been the one who had been in the limelight just now. That's handsome. There are more handsome ones behind. Li Yuanbo looked up at the plaque hanging steadily, and then at Li Yundong with a face full of shock. He said, How did you throw such a heavy plaque up there? Li Yundong chuckled and said, It's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning. A trace of doubt suddenly flashed in Li Yuanbo's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. He turned around with a smile and wanted to walk into the tea house with Li Yundong. At this time Han Lin, who had been hiding not far away and filming, suddenly ran over. He said loudly, Reporter Li, can I do a brief interview with you? Li Yuanbo frowned secretly and said lightly, I'm here to attend a friend's celebration today. This kind of thing can't be done, right? As he said this, he turned around and went into the tea house. Although it was a question, the tone of it was clear that there was no room for negotiation. Although Han Lin was arrogant, he was not a fool. He looked embarrassed and thought to himself, If I only take pictures without an interview, I will still be scolded when I go back. Han Lin had no choice but to turn around and say to Li Yundong in a low voice, Boss Li, I didn't recognize you just now and offended you. Please don't take it to heart. Can I do an interview with you? It's very short, just 1 minute. Li Yundong smiled slightly and asked, Who are you? Seeing that Li Yundong didn't seem to want to embarrass him, Han Lin was overjoyed and said, I. But Li Yundong only waited for him to say one word before he raised his palm and said, I'm sorry. I can't remember it even if you say it. Please. After that he turned around and left. Han Lin's face suddenly turned red. He stood there alone, panting heavily. After a long time, He gritted his teeth and left bitterly. Li Yundong went upstairs and settled everyone down. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He secretly wiped his sweat and thought to himself, everything should be fine now, right? I have to accompany these officials carefully all the time. It's really difficult to serve them. It's so painful. While he was thinking, he suddenly saw Su Chan running up with a frightened and nervous face. When Li Yundong saw her, he immediately smiled bitterly and said, Madam, what's wrong with you again? Su Chan hurriedly waved her hand, pulled Li Yundong aside and whispered, Yundong, bad news. Li Yundong asked curiously, What's wrong? Look at how scared you are. Su Chan said anxiously, No, there are 2 more guests. Li Yundong laughed and said, If there are guests, then there will be more seats. Are there no seats left? Su Chan stamped her feet and said, No. These 2 people are Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping. Li Yundong was shocked. The lady of the earthly fire, Zhang Ling, and her disciple Zhou Ping. Su Chan nodded her head like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, it's them. Li Yundong took a deep breath and said, Today is our opening ceremony. What are they doing here? Are they here to make trouble? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.